Aight class, welcome back. Pull up a seat, adjust your mindsets, and let's tap into the pulse of power. We've been on a ride, y'all, from the 1700s, through the dust and fire of revolution, past the ink of the Constitution, through civil wars, industrial booms, and presidential rooms full of promises and problems. And now, we're here. It's 1909. A brand new century, and a brand new man in the White House, William Howard Taft. Big frame, bigger vision, and a pen that stayed moving. Over 700 executive orders in his lifetime, and we about to break them down 1 year at a time. But before we start decoding the orders, the influence, the reach, let's do what we always do. Check in with our brother out in time, the one walking the timeline for us. Let's check on President Joe Biden, who's been boots on the ground since the 1700s, and see how he's holding up now that we've landed in 1909. Joe, talk to us. What's the scene like? What's the weight of Taft's first moves, and how much of it still touches us today?
You know, when you've spent time walking this American timeline like I have, through the grit, the ink, the legacy, you start to realize that every presidency ain't just a person, it's a pivot. Now let's talk about who came before the 27th. That's Theodore Roosevelt. Big personality, rough rider, a man who didn't whisper into the halls of history, he roared. He fought monopolies, pushed conservation, and swung that big stick when it came to foreign policy. He changed the idea of what a president could do and how far executive power could reach. But here's the thing, even the loudest voices need steady hands to hold what they build. And that brings us to number 27, William Howard Taft. Now, Taft wasn't flashy. He didn't ride horseback with headlines, but he governed with structure, law, and depth. And if you're looking for what that means to us today, I'll tell you. He showed us that leadership ain't always about the spotlight. It's about the follow-through. It's about building systems that last longer than applause. Taft took the expanding federal government that Roosevelt helped shape and gave it rules, regulations, and reform. He signed more executive orders than most realize, many of which are still etched into the machinery of our land and labor. So as we enter 1909, don't underestimate the quiet ones, because sometimes it's the soft-spoken hands that hold the country's shape when the noise fades. Let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens, seekers of truth, I am William Howard Taft. I was born on September 15th, 1857, in Cincinnati, Ohio, into a family devoted to service, education, and civic responsibility. My father, Alphonso Taft, served as Attorney General and Secretary of War under President Ulysses S. Grant, and it was from him I inherited a deep respect for law, order, and justice. Unlike some of my predecessors and successors, I did not dream of the presidency as a child. My ambition for much of my life was to wear the robes of a judge. I found my calling in the court, in interpretation of the law, in the pursuit of constitutional clarity, and in the methodical, deliberate path of jurisprudence. But fate and Theodore Roosevelt had other plans. Before ascending to the presidency, I served as a Superior Court judge in Ohio, then Solicitor General of the United States, and later as a Federal Circuit Court judge. I governed the Philippines after the Spanish-American War, where I balanced reform and order with an eye toward eventual Filipino autonomy, a delicate task requiring restraint and vision. I also served as Secretary of War under Roosevelt, and it was during this time that he groomed me, perhaps a bit too eagerly, as his successor. In 1909, I became the 27th President of the United States. I never possessed Roosevelt's charisma, nor his appetite for battle, but I shared many of his progressive ideals, albeit tempered with a jurist's patience. My presidency, often misunderstood, was defined by trust-busting with legal precision, the strengthening of the Interstate Commerce Commission, and a careful yet firm hand in regulating corporate power. I believed in the rule of law, not in wielding executive power like a saber, but in applying it like a gavel. Where Roosevelt charged like a rough rider, I measured, paused, and litigated. I pushed for tariff reform, culminating in the Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act, though it proved politically costly. I expanded civil service protections, established the Bureau of Mines, and created the Department of Labor as a separate entity. My aim was not glory, but groundwork, building strong institutions that could stand the test of time. Yes, I had my faults. I was cautious where boldness was demanded and political loyalty frayed under my judicial temperament, but I never betrayed the Constitution, and I never forgot that the presidency is not above the law. History may remember me more for my weight. I was indeed the heaviest president, tipping the scale near 340 pounds, but I hope it also remembers my integrity. My presidency may not have thrilled the crowd, but it preserved the republic's form, and that to me was the higher calling. He pauses, grips the lectern, and gazes outward. Now, if you'll indulge me, let us speak of my use of executive authority. Now, let us begin. As President of the United States, I hereby speak of the executive orders I issued in the service of this great nation. Each decision, each act was weighed with the responsibility of preserving order, fostering justice, and refining the mechanisms of government. Let me begin with the year of our Lord, 1909. 1909, Executive Order 1051. On March 16, 1909, I renamed LaSalle National Forest, located in Utah and Colorado, to LaSalle National Forest. Executive Order 1052. March 23rd, I amended the Civil Service Rules in relation to proposed employee transfers. Executive Order 1053. March 24th, I authorized the reinstatement of F.B. Simons as clerk in the Internal Revenue Office. Executive Order 1054. March 30th, I restored lands in Minnesota, previously reserved at the headwaters of the Mississippi River, to the public domain. Executive Order 1055. On that same day, I enlarged the Parang Military Reservation in Mindanao within the Philippine Islands. Executive Order 1056. Also on March 30th, I reserved lands in Arkansas for the operation of Lock and Dam Number 3 on the Upper White River. Executive Order 1057. April 2nd, I enlarged the Mosquito Inlet Reservation in Florida. Executive Order 1058. April 6th, I authorized the reinstatement of Leonard J. Garver to a position in the classified service. Executive Order 1059. April 7th, I authorized the reinstatement of Nanny M. Whalen to her clerkship within the Treasury Department. Executive Order 1060. That same day, I approved the admission of deaf mutes to examinations for civil service roles. Executive Order 1061. On April 8th, I directed the Solicitor General to report to me on branding requirements for whiskey. Executive Order 1062, April 14th. I instructed all department heads to comply with congressional resolutions requesting information when in the public interest. Executive Order 1063, April 16th. I authorized the appointment of Archibald S. Pinkett as clerk in the State Department without examination. Executive Order 1064. Also on April 16th, I granted a similar appointment to Francis M. Marsh. Executive Order 1065. April 21st, I permitted the incidental assignment of laborers to classified work. Executive Order 1066. April 23rd, I reserved San Miguel Island, California for lighthouse purposes. Executive Order 1067. That same day, I redefined the reservation boundaries of Fort William H. Seward in Chilkat Inlet, Alaska. Executive Order 1068. April 26th, I diminished the size of Holy Cross National Forest in Colorado. Executive Order 1069. On that date, I established Sopris National Forest from a portion of Holy Cross National Forest. Executive Order 1070. May 12th, I reduced the military reservation on Shaw Island in the state of Washington. Executive Order 1071. May 13th, I created the General Supply Committee to systematize purchases of common supplies for government departments. Executive Order 1072. May 14th, I modified civil service restrictions regarding political activity in Navy yards. Executive Order 1073. May 17th, I authorized the appointment of Nina L. Carrington as a clerk in the classified service without examination. Executive Order 1074. May 21st, I revoked a previous order that had appointed the Council of Fine Arts. Executive Order 1075. On the same day, I reserved lands near Sparta, Wisconsin for a military target range. Executive Order 1076, May 22nd, I ordered that government offices be closed on Mondays when certain holidays fall on the preceding Sunday. Executive Order 1077, May 25th, I directed that communications and reports relative to certain territories and possessions be transmitted through the Department of the Interior. Executive Order 1078. On the same day, I again reinstated Mr. Simons, this time as an analytical chemist in the Treasury. Executive Order 1079, May 28th, I authorized the appointment of Carl G. Barth as expert in shop management at the Watertown Arsenal. Executive Order 1080, also on May 28th, I reduced the portion of Crow Creek Forest Reserve transferred to the War Department for military use. Executive Order 1081, June 2nd, I ordered that communications and reports regarding Indian Territory be directed appropriately. Executive Order 1082, June 3rd, I reserved lands in Arizona for the Coast and Geodetic Survey for a magnetic observatory. Executive Order 1083, June 7th, I amended the tariff of consular fees. Executive Order 1084, June 8th, I provided that 4 hours on Saturdays during July through September shall constitute a full workday for federal employees. Executive Order 1085. June 11th, I amended a prior executive order to ensure railroad cars in the Canal Zone are equipped with proper safety appliances. Executive Order 1086. June 15th, I reserved land in Rampart, Alaska for the operation of military telegraph lines. Executive Order 1087. On that day, I authorized the reinstatement of Hattie M. Miller in the Patent Office. Executive Order 1088, June 16th, I amended Executive Order 1071 to exclude the District of Columbia government from the General Supply Committee. Executive Order 1089, June 17th, I reemployed repairmen for Interior Department buildings. Executive Order 1090, also June 17th, I restored to the public domain lands in Arizona that had been reserved for the Papago Indians. Executive Order 1091. June 19th, I reinstated George M. Ratton as interpreter. Executive Order 1092. That day, I designated the Assistant Attorney General for the Interior Department to act in the Secretary's absence. Executive Order 1093. June 21st, I reinstated Hattie M. Miller again, this time as a skilled laborer in the Patent Office. Executive Order 1094. June 23rd, I amended civil service rules to exempt War Department cable electricians from standard examination. Executive Order 1095, June 25th, I appointed Arthur F. Statter as a special employee of the Treasury Department. Executive Order 1096. On June 26th, I authorized the reinstatement of Lucian W. Powell to the classified service, specifically in the Department of the Interior. Executive Order 1097. On June 28th, I reduced the portion of Tongass National Forest in Alaska. Executive Order 1098. That same day, I restored to the public domain certain lands in Colorado, formerly part of the Holy Cross National Forest. Executive Order 1099. Again on June 28th, I approved the transfer of certain agricultural lands from the public domain in Montana to the Reclamation Service. Executive Order 1100. June 29th, I amended rules concerning appointments to classified laborer positions within the federal service. Executive Order 1101. July 1st, I placed all customs employees in the Philippine Islands under the classified service. Executive Order 1102. July 3rd, I reinstated Frances W. Moffett, allowing her re-entry into the civil service at the Department of Commerce and Labor. Executive Order 1103. July 6th, I enlarged the boundaries of the Fort George Wright Military Reservation in Washington State. Executive Order 1104. July 9th, I reserved a tract of land at Sitka, Alaska for the U.S. Marine Hospital Service. Executive Order 1105. On that same day, I granted permission for Andrew T. Hay to be reinstated in the Post Office Department. Executive Order 1106. July 12th, I established examination procedures for assistant engineers in the Isthmian Canal Commission. Executive Order 1107. July 13th, I restored certain lands in Arizona from reservation status to the public domain. Executive Order 1108. July 14th, I reserved a portion of land in Alaska for the construction of a wireless telegraph station. Executive Order 1109. July 15th, I authorized the use of surplus land near San Juan, Puerto Rico by the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1110. July 16th, I created a committee to examine lighthouse service equipment and its modernization needs. Executive Order 1111, July 17th, I removed the political restriction against Ms. Clara G. Mulcahy and allowed her to return to government service. Executive Order 1112, July 19th, I authorize the restoration of lands in Montana from a previous military reservation to civilian control. Executive Order 1113, July 21st, I allowed the appointment of Alfred W. McCann to the Department of Agriculture without examination. Executive Order 1114, July 23rd, I enlarged the military reservation at Fort Shafter, Hawaii. Executive Order 1115. On the same day, I created a new Forest Supervisor District in the Colorado National Forest. Executive Order 1116. July 24th, I revoked earlier executive orders concerning the use of lands at West Point, New York, and granted the War Department new jurisdiction over that ground. Executive Order 1117. July 26th, I established procedures for promotions within the Customs Service in the Philippines. Executive Order 1118. July 27th, I authorized William W. Husband's appointment to the Department of Commerce and Labor without examination. Executive Order 1119. July 28th, I enlarged the boundaries of the Yosemite National Park by including previously omitted land. Executive Order 1120, July 29th, I established that members of the Civil Service Commission may administer oaths to examinees. Executive Order 1121, July 30th, I reinstated Elizabeth B. Bailey in the Government Printing Office. Executive Order 1122, on that day as well, I created a special board to examine the safety standards of government workshops. Executive Order 1123, July 31st, I restored to the public domain a portion of land in Oregon previously reserved for military use. Executive Order 1124, August 2nd, I approved the consolidation of the Sitgreaves and Black Mesa National Forests in Arizona into a new forest named Apache National Forest. Executive Order 1125, August 4th, I restored to the public domain lands excluded from the new Apache forest boundaries. Executive Order 1126, August 5th, I permitted appointment of John M. Barry as a physician in the Canal Zone without civil service examination. Executive Order 1127, August 6th, I created a committee to consider improvements to the federal job classification system. Executive Order 1128, August 9th, I revoked previous orders and released the naval reservation on Culebra Island in Puerto Rico. Executive Order 1129, August 10th, I authorized the appointment of George R. Putnam as Commissioner of Lighthouses. Executive Order 1130, August 11th, I amended civil service rules to clarify the rights of reinstated employees in the classified service. Executive Order 1131. August 12th, I designated Camp Perry, Ohio, as the permanent site for National Military Target Practice. Executive Order 1132. August 14th, I revoked portions of earlier executive orders that had reserved lands in Nevada, returning them to the public domain. Executive Order 1133. August 16th, I reserved lands in the state of Washington for lighthouse purposes. Executive Order 1134. August 17th, I authorized Mrs. H. H. Botts to be reinstated to her position at the Department of Commerce and Labor. Executive Order 1135. August 18th, I amended prior orders on employment preferences for veterans and their widows. Executive Order 1136. August 19th, I changed the status of a parcel of land in Florida from naval to lighthouse reservation. Executive Order 1137. August 20th, I established a rule that authorized employees of the Philippine government to be admitted to the classified service when transferred to the federal government. Emma need a bite to eat one sec. Executive Order 1138. On August 21st, I enlarged the boundaries of the Monterey Forest Reserve in California, reinforcing our commitment to conservation. Executive Order 1139. That same day, I reserved land in the territory of Alaska for coal investigation purposes under the U.S. Geological Survey. Executive Order 1140. August 23rd, I restored to the public domain a portion of the Palouse National Forest in Idaho, which had been deemed no longer necessary for forest purposes. Executive Order 1141, August 24th, I approved the appointment of a lighthouse inspector in the Canal Zone exempt from civil service examination. Executive Order 1142, August 25th, I directed that certain parcels of land be used for the construction of public roads in Oklahoma. Executive Order 1143, on August 26th, I amended previous orders regarding the civil service status of employees transferred from one department to another. Executive Order 1144, August 27th, I approved the creation of a new fire district in the city of Manila under the jurisdiction of the Philippine government. Executive Order 1145, August 28th, I restored certain lands in Colorado to the public domain, previously withdrawn for reservoir use. Executive Order 1146, August 30th, I ordered the transfer of certain agricultural experiment stations in Puerto Rico to the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1147, August 31st, I authorized the appointment of special agents in the Bureau of Corporations without examination when necessary. Executive Order 1148, September 1st, I reserved land at Unalaska Island in Alaska for radio and telegraph station construction. Executive Order 1149, September 2nd, I restored to the public domain a tract of land in Nevada formerly held for irrigation surveys. Executive Order 1150, September 3rd, I enlarged the area of the Black Hills National Forest in South Dakota. Executive Order 1151, September 4th, I approved the reinstatement of Theodore S. Perkins into the government service at the Department of the Interior. Executive Order 1152, September 7th, I transferred employees in the Bureau of the Census to permanent classified status following satisfactory temporary service. Executive Order 1153, September 8th, I authorized the reservation of certain lands in Arizona for the Hopi Indians. Executive Order 1154, September 9th, I allowed federal clerks transferred from the Philippine Service to be exempt from standard examination. Executive Order 1155, September 10th, I ordered that certain lands at Kodiak Island, Alaska, be reserved for lighthouse and naval purposes. Executive Order 1156, September 11th, I approved amendments to the Civil Service rules regarding promotions in the Post Office Department. Executive Order 1157, September 13th, I authorized the reinstatement of Miss Sarah M. Higley to her former position at the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1158, September 14th, I created a commission to evaluate the standardization of government office equipment. Executive Order 1159, September 15th, I restored to the public domain portions of forest land in Oregon and Washington that had been erroneously included in national forest boundaries. Executive Order 1160, September 16th, I reserved a site on Guam for future military and naval use. Executive Order 1161, September 17th, I authorized the use of certain lands in the District of Columbia for the construction of public school buildings. Executive Order 1162, September 18th, I appointed a board to study reclassification procedures within the Federal Civil Service. Executive Order 1163, September 20th, I reserved lands near the Mississippi River for harbor improvement projects under the War Department. Executive Order 1164, September 21st, I restored certain lands in Arizona and New Mexico for agricultural entry. Executive Order 1165, September 22nd, I ordered changes to the rules governing reinstatement after resignation from government service. Executive Order 1166, September 23rd, I created a new lighthouse district encompassing the coastlines of Oregon and Washington. Executive Order 1167, September 24th, I enlarged the Sitka National Monument in Alaska, protecting native cultural and historic remains. Executive Order 1168, September 25th, I removed restrictions on appointment for veterans with honorable service discharged for disability. Executive Order 1169, September 27th, I enlarged the San Juan Military Reservation in Puerto Rico to improve defense capability. Executive Order 1170, September 28th, I authorized the appointment of William C. Frick to the General Land Office without examination. Executive Order 1171, September 29th, I approved a temporary appointment policy for clerks in the Panama Canal Zone. Executive Order 1172, September 30th, I consolidated several lighthouse reservations in California to streamline operations. Executive Order 1173, October 1st, I restored a tract of land in Oklahoma from reservation to public entry. Executive Order 1174, October 2nd, I permitted the reinstatement of Hiram C. Fuller at the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1175, October 4th, I reserved land at Fairbanks, Alaska for the use of the U.S. Geological Survey and Mineral Investigations, Executive Order 1176, October 5th, I allowed a portion of the Fort Huachuca Military Reservation in Arizona to be used for telegraph line extension. Executive Order 1177, October 6th, I amended regulations for temporary appointments in the Postal Service. Executive Order 1178, October 7th, I authorized the establishment of the Cleveland National Forest in California, merging several smaller reserves. Executive Order 1179, October 8th, I designated lands in the Philippines for exclusive use by the Bureau of Science. Executive Order 1180, October 9th, I clarified rules regarding examination waivers for employees transferred from insular services. Executive Order 1181, October 11th, I approved the reinstatement of John S. Holden to the General Land Office. Executive Order 1182, October 12th, I reserved land at Nome, Alaska for federal building purposes. Executive Order 1183, October 13th, I reorganized the administrative boundaries of the Bitterroot National Forest. Executive Order 1184, October 14th, I amended the Civil Service rules to allow immediate temporary appointments under exceptional conditions. Executive Order 1185, October 15th, I restored to the public domain certain lands in Idaho previously withdrawn for forest purposes. Executive Order 1186, October 16th, I authorized use of a military reservation in Wyoming for public road construction. Executive Order 1187, October 18th, I approved the consolidation of lands into the Malheur National Forest in Oregon. Executive Order 1188, October 19th, I reinstated Ms. Clara L. Sutherland into the classified civil service. Executive Order 1189, October 20th, I restored land at Fort Bliss, Texas, from reservation status to public use. Executive Order 1190, October 21st, I amended prior orders on examining boards in the civil service. Executive Order 1191, October 22nd, I withdrew land in Utah for future town site development under reclamation projects. Executive Order 1192, October 23rd, I created new forest supervisor districts in the Lolo National Forest. Executive Order 1193, October 25th, I approved appointment of a chief clerk in the War Department without examination. Executive Order 1194, October 26th, I authorized certain forest lands in California to be restored to the public domain. Executive Order 1195, October 27th, I ordered additional protections for naval coal reserves in Alaska. Executive Order 1196, October 28th, I issued revised civil service procedures for the Bureau of Insular Affairs. Executive Order 1197, October 29th, I granted lands in Arizona to the Apache Nation for school purposes. Executive Order 1198, October 30th, I reserved land near Fairbanks, Alaska for a Weather Bureau station. Executive Order 1199, November 1st, I amended rules to allow direct transfer of eligible clerks between departments without examination. Executive Order 1200, November 2nd, I restored public lands in South Dakota from reservation to general entry. With Executive Order 1200, I recognized that even the milestones of paperwork held symbolic meaning. A government mature enough to administer growth with order and restraint with clarity. Executive Order 1201, November 3rd, I authorized the reinstatement of Charles H. O'Neill in the Post Office Department. Executive Order 1202, November 4th, I reserved coastal lands near Cordova, Alaska for light and navigation use. Executive Order 1203, November 5th, I restored lands in Colorado for public agricultural use after canceling prior reservoir withdrawals. Executive Order 1204, November 6th, I expanded the boundaries of the Lassen National Forest. Executive Order 1205, November 8th, I reinstated Ms. Kate B. Miller in the Department of Commerce and Labor. Executive Order 1206, November 9th, I designated land in the Philippines for public instruction facilities. Executive Order 1207, November 10th, I restored a military tract at Fort McPherson, Georgia for civilian municipal development. Executive Order 1208, November 12th, I transferred authority of certain lighthouse duties to the Department of Commerce and Labor. Executive Order 1209, November 13th, I allowed temporary appointments in emergency reclamation survey parties. Executive Order 1210. November 15th, I reinstated Howard G. Price at the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1211. November 16th, I adjusted the civil service classification of certain customs employees in Hawaii. Executive Order 1212. November 17th, I authorized withdrawal of land in Arizona for public school sites. Executive Order 1213. November 18th, I reserved land in Alaska for the erection of a wireless communication station. Executive Order 1214. November 19th, I enlarged the Shoshone National Forest boundaries in Wyoming. Executive Order 1215. November 20th, I authorized temporary waivers for field engineers in emergency dam repairs. Executive Order 1216. November 22nd, I ordered that the status of transferred employees from insular to federal posts be clarified for promotion purposes. Executive Order 1217. November 23rd, I reinstated Edward R. Chambers into the Postal Service. Executive Order 1218. November 24th, I restored lands in Nevada to the public domain. Executive Order 1219. November 26th, I created a commission to evaluate merit-based transfers within the executive branch. Executive Order 1220. November 27th, I approved that certain lands at Cape Henry, Virginia be used for coast artillery practice. Executive Order 1221. November 29th, I revoked earlier orders reserving land at Fort Omaha and restored portions to civil use. Executive Order 1222. November 30th, I consolidated administrative functions in the Forest Service for the Northern Districts. Executive Order 1223. December 1st, I authorized the reinstatement of Louis C. LaFlamme in the Department of the Interior. Executive Order 1224, December 2nd, I restored a portion of the Sierra National Forest to the public domain. Executive Order 1225, December 3rd, I approved the appointment of Dr. Charles H. Grasty as an expert without examination for a special public health survey. Executive Order 1226, December 4th, I reserved a tract of land at Dutch Harbor, Alaska for cable and telegraph stations. Executive Order 1227, December 6th, I amended Civil Service Rule 7 to clarify temporary appointments made during competitive exam delays. Executive Order 1228. December 7th, I reinstated Miss Eleanor M. Rand at the Bureau of Fisheries. Executive Order 1229. December 8th, I authorized the reservation of land at Fort Egbert, Alaska, for use as a signal station. Executive Order 1230. December 9th, I approved the temporary use of government land in Oklahoma for educational purposes. Executive Order 1231. December 10th, I transferred jurisdiction of certain lighthouse stations in the Philippines to the Bureau of Insular Affairs. Executive Order 1232. December 11th, I restored a tract of land near Helena, Montana for settlement and homesteading. Executive Order 1233. December 13th, I amended postal regulations to allow remote office clerks seasonal leave during winter closures. Executive Order 1234. December 14th, I approved the expansion of Lassen Peak National Forest boundaries in Northern California. Executive Order 1235, December 15th, I reserved lands in Arizona for the Yuma Indian Reservation, ensuring adequate agricultural space. Executive Order 1236, December 16th, I reinstated Charles T. Hunter into classified service in the Census Bureau. Executive Order 1237, December 17th, I reserved coastal land in the territory of Hawaii for quarantine station development. Executive Order 1238, December 18th, I approved the creation of an interdepartmental advisory board on federal architecture standards. Executive Order 1239, December 20th, I revoked a previous land withdrawal in Wyoming for failed irrigation purposes. Executive Order 1240. December 21st, I granted lands in the territory of Alaska for a weather observation station at Valdez. Executive Order 1241. December 22nd, I reinstated Joseph C. Wiggins in the War Department. Executive Order 1242. December 23rd, I authorized the consolidation of statistical offices within the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1243. December 24th, I ordered the continued preservation of giant sequoia groves in the Sierra National Forest. Executive Order 1244, December 27th, I reserved land in New Mexico for a federal assay office under the Treasury Department. Executive Order 1245, December 28th, I restored land at Fort Wingate, New Mexico to public use. Executive Order 1246, December 29th, I approved the reappointment of George M. Vickers in the Department of Justice. Executive Order 1247, December 30th, I ordered the temporary employment of legal researchers to assist in land claim litigation. Executive Order 1248, December 31st, I closed the year by restoring land in Utah to homesteading after concluding it was unfit for forest reservation. Before we press on into the business of 1910, I believe it's time for a short intermission. I'll be stepping away to enjoy a modest plate of chicken and a glass of grape juice, my preferred fare when reflecting on the affairs of state. In the meantime, President Joseph R. Biden will offer a few thoughts on the year 1909 from a modern perspective. He may speak softly, but you'll want to lean in. He tends to whisper the truth when it matters most.
Thank you for the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1909, his very first year in office, President William Howard Taft issued over 240 executive orders. Let that sink in. Most presidents take a few months to warm up. Taft came out the gate with a full stride. He didn't use the executive pen to show power. He used it to build structure. That year alone, he expanded protections on millions of acres of forest land, formalized military land reservations in Alaska and the Philippines, and streamlined how federal workers were reinstated, examined, and managed. He brought discipline to the federal workforce, not just loyalty. In 1909, Taft's orders helped establish the legal and logistical framework for public land surveys, naval bases, Indian reservations, and conservation zones. These weren't just boxes on a map. They were foundations, places where communities would grow, and where government presence brought order to what was once wild or undefined. And his decision to organize and improve civil service policies, that set a tone we still carry today in every branch of federal employment. So as we remember that pivotal first year, we tip our hats to President Taft, a man who saw government not just as power, but as precision. Now, before I hand the mic back to him, two quick things you might not know about the big guy. One, he's the only American in history to serve as both President and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And two, the White House had to install a custom bathtub just for him. Not kidding, look it up. All right, Will, your stage again.
A new year arrived, 1910, my second in office. I had grown comfortable with the machinery of executive governance. The American landscape was evolving. Our territories needed structure, our forests protection, and our departments reform. So I went to work, not with fanfare, but with force of will. January 1910, Executive Order 1249, January 3rd, I reserved land in Alaska for use by the Signal Corps to expand telegraph and communication efforts. Executive Order 1250, January 5th, I reinstated Albert F. Jenkins to the classified service in the Department of the Treasury. Executive Order 1251, January 6th, I adjusted boundaries of the Klamath Forest Reserve in Oregon to account for surveyed inaccuracies. Executive Order 1252, January 8th, I authorized the transfer of unoccupied lighthouse lands in Florida to the War Department. Executive Order 1253, January 10th, I reserved land in Arizona for the expansion of the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. Executive Order 1254, January 11th, I directed the Department of the Interior to survey portions of the newly created National Forest. Executive Order 1255, January 12th, I amended civil service rules to streamline examination procedures for temporary employees. Executive Order 1256, January 14th, I reserved land at Guam for use as a naval coal depot. Executive Order 1257, January 17th, I authorized the use of Fort Sam Houston land in Texas for permanent military medical facilities. Executive Order 1258, January 19th, I transferred certain federal lands in Montana to the Bureau of Reclamation for irrigation use. Executive Order 1259. January 20th, I restored to the public domain portions of the Coconino Forest Reserve in Arizona. Executive Order 1260. January 21st, I created the Tonto National Forest, preserving over 2 million acres in Arizona. Executive Order 1261. January 22nd, I ordered the appointment of a commission to study postal efficiency in rural areas. Executive Order 1262. January 24th, I reserved land near Cordova, Alaska for the use of a federal assay office. Executive Order 1263. January 26th, I reinstated Mabel W. Decker in the Department of Agriculture's Clerical Division. Executive Order 1264. January 27th, I ordered a review of Customs House operations at key Gulf Coast ports. Executive Order 1265, January 28th, I approved the extension of the Coeur d'Alene Indian Reservation in Idaho. Executive Order 1266, January 29th, I restored surplus lands in Utah to the public domain after rejecting them for reservoir projects. Executive Order 1267, January 31st, I declared that forest rangers were to receive federal housing on site, ensuring rapid response to wildfire events. February 1910, Executive Order 1268. February 1st, I designated lands in the territory of Hawaii for naval radio installation, ensuring we could speak across oceans. Executive Order 1269. February 2nd, I reinstated William H. Langston to the Classified Service Office of the Auditor for the Post Office Department. Executive Order 1270. February 4th, I reserved land in the Panama Canal Zone for military and sanitary infrastructure. The zone was still a fresh wound in the jungle. It needed order. Executive Order 1271. February 5th, I adjusted boundaries of the Lassen Peak Forest Reserve in California to protect vital watersheds. Executive Order 1272. February 7th, I approved an expanded reservation for the Papago Indian community in Arizona. Executive Order 1273. February 9th, I directed the Department of Commerce and Labor to prepare a study on immigration patterns at Galveston and New Orleans. Executive Order 1274. February 10th, I reserved additional land in Alaska for post offices and communication hubs, vital lifelines in the wild frontier. Executive Order 1275, February 11th, I signed an order allocating land at Fort Bliss, Texas for cavalry maneuver exercises. Executive Order 1276, February 12th, I reinstated Margaret D. Keyes in the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Justice in this case was overdue. Executive Order 1277, February 14th, I transferred land near Bellingham, Washington to the U.S. Lighthouse Service for Pacific Coast Navigation. Executive Order 1278, February 16th, I ordered the expansion of the Columbia Forest Reserve into what would become Mount Hood National Forest. Executive Order 1279, February 17th, I authorized the establishment of the Fort Sill Military Reservation School in Oklahoma. Executive Order 1280, February 19th, I designated lands near Manila in the Philippines for use as a permanent U.S. naval training site. Executive Order 1281, February 21st, I opened parts of the previously closed Wichita Forest lands for regulated grazing, supporting frontier cattlemen while preserving the land. Executive Order 1282, February 22nd, I proclaimed a formal observance of Washington's birthday within all military departments, a symbolic reaffirmation of discipline and tradition. Executive Order 1283, February 23rd, I approved a clerical promotion structure for the government printing office, clarity where chaos once prevailed. Executive Order 1284, February 25th, I ordered the Bureau of Mines to begin mapping subterranean mineral lines in Colorado and Nevada. Executive Order 1285, February 27th, I transferred surplus Army lands in Georgia for use by the Department of Agriculture in agricultural experimentation. March 1910, Executive Order 1286. March 1st, I reserved a stretch of land along the Rio Grande in Texas for Border Patrol and Customs Enforcement, protecting trade and sovereignty alike. Executive Order 1287. March 2nd, I ordered the survey and classification of timber reserves in the Alaska Territory, ensuring extraction without exploitation. Executive Order 1288. March 4th, I reinstated John M. Purdy to the classified civil service in the Department of the Interior, correcting a procedural dismissal. Executive Order 1289, March 5th, I designated lands in New Mexico for the construction of a federal courthouse and post office. Law and Letters hand in hand. Executive Order 1290, March 7th, I created the Montezuma National Forest in Colorado, consolidating and extending forest lands for watershed protection and fire management. Executive Order 1291, March 8th, I ordered the expansion of telegraph lines across Indian Territory under military oversight to aid in both governance and education. Executive Order 1292, March 10th, I reinstated Mary L. Bradshaw to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Her record had been impeccable. Her dismissal, not so. Executive Order 1293, March 11th, I established an experimental agricultural station in the Oklahoma Territory under the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1294, March 13th, I authorized a civil engineering inspection of all federal harbor projects along the Atlantic coast beginning in Norfolk, Virginia. Executive Order 1295, March 15th, I reinstated Benjamin K. Doyle to the Department of Justice Clerical Service after new evidence favored his appeal. Executive Order 1296, March 17th, I created a policy limiting military land acquisitions unless certified essential by both the War and Navy departments. A break on imperial enthusiasm. Executive Order 1297, March 19th, I adjusted the boundaries of the Sequoia National Forest in California to preserve both ancient groves and grazing rights. Executive Order 1298, March 21st, I reserved lands in the Philippines for a leprosy treatment colony at Culion, continuing the Roosevelt-era public health push. Executive Order 1299, March 23rd, I ordered the reclassification of clerical salary grades in the Department of the Treasury to attract talent and reduce turnover. Executive Order 1300, March 25th, I reinstated William R. McClure in the Bureau of Navigation following a congressional recommendation. Executive Order 1301, March 27th, I reserved land in Arizona for expansion of the Hopi Indian schools. Education is the root of all equity. Executive Order 1302, March 29th, I directed the modernization of record-keeping protocols in the Patent Office. Innovation demands clarity. Executive Order 1303. March 31st, I signed an order authorizing the construction of a wireless telegraph station in Key West, Florida, a gateway to the Caribbean and beyond. April 1910, Executive Order 1304. April 2nd, I reserved land at San Juan Island, Alaska, for a U.S. Marine hospital and quarantine station. Executive Order 1305. April 4th, I created the administrative site of Big Pine for the Inyo National Forest in California. Executive Order 1306, April 6th, I reinstated Mabel A. James to the Bureau of Mines clerical staff. Executive Order 1307, April 8th, I established the Hazy Islands Bird Reservation in Alaska, protecting habitat for seabirds. Executive Order 1308, April 10th, I set aside land near Chugach National Forest for lighthouse purposes, aiding maritime safety. Executive Order 1309, April 12th, I authorized the designation of Drake Peaks Administrative Site in the Sierra National Forest. Executive Order 1310, April 14th, I reserved lands around Fort Douglas, Utah for military communications and training. Executive Order 1311, April 16th. I expanded lines of communication in the Canal Zone by building telegraph routes. Executive Order 1312, April 18th. I reinstated Harry L. Johnson at the Department of Agriculture due to administrative errors. Executive Order 1313, April 20th. I established a birds preserve on Yakutat Bay in Alaska, nature's quietest sanctuaries. Executive Order 1314, April 22nd, I authorized improved electric safety regulations in government buildings. Executive Order 1315. April 24th, I developed a new system for federal clerk promotion within the General Land Office. Executive Order 1316. April 26th, I reserved land in southwestern Idaho for the Coeur d'Alene Indian Reservation, nurturing tribal lands. Executive Order 1317. April 28th, I ordered a resurvey of the Bitterroot Forest Reserve to correct earlier boundary errors. Executive Order 1318. April 30th, I created the Stony Ford Administrative Site in the Sequoia National Forest to manage wildfire response. May 1910, Executive Order 1319. May 2nd, I reserved land near Fort Monroe, Virginia for coastal artillery training. Executive Order 1320. May 4th, I reinstated Joseph M. Becker to the Customs House in Boston. Integrity demanded fairness. Executive Order 1321. May 6th, I reserved the Gila River Indian Reservation for tribal agricultural development. Executive Order 1322. May 8th, I established mandate for regular sanitary inspections at all Marine Hospital Service facilities. Executive Order 1323, May 10th, I transferred surplus Navy lands in Guam for public education purposes. Executive Order 1324, May 12th, I resolved record-keeping issues in the Oregon Land Office by redrawing district lines. Executive Order 1325, May 14th, I set aside land in Colorado near Denver for a federal assay office run by the Treasury. Executive Order 1326, May 16th, I endorsed the creation of an agricultural experiment station in New Mexico. Executive Order 1327. May 18th, I authorized an improved classification system for federal engineers. Executive Order 1328. May 20th, I reserved marshlands in northern Florida for wildlife preservation. Executive Order 1329, May 22nd, I reinstated Lillian M. Grant to the Census Bureau based on positive performance reviews. Executive Order 1330, May 24th, I directed federal purchase of patterned cement for consistent highways. Executive Order 1331, May 26th, I reserved territory for expansion of the Havasupai Reservation near the Grand Canyon. Executive Order 1332, May 28th, I created the Clare Administrative Site to shoot down rampant forest fires in Siskiyou National Forest. Executive Order 1333, May 30th, I transferred lighthouse responsibilities in Alaska to the Treasury's Lighthouse Service. June 1910, Executive Order 1334. June 1st, I reserved lands in the Philippines for a future U.S. Naval Training Center near Manila Bay. Executive Order 1335, June 3rd, I reinstated Eunice A. Peters to the War Department Civil Service roles. Executive Order 1336, June 5th, I expanded the Santa Barbara National Forest in California by merging in neighboring reserves. Executive Order 1337, June 7th, I created the Tariff Board, defining its members' roles and reporting structures. Executive Order 1338, June 9th, I designated lands as part of the North Yakima Agricultural District for irrigation planning. Executive Order 1339. June 11th, I reinstated Samuel G. Barnes to the Patent Office due to clerical misfilings. Executive Order 1340. June 13th, I set aside Montana lands for expansion of the Blackfoot Indian Reservation. Executive Order 1341. June 15th, I centralized records within the Forest Service for more efficient fire suppression. Executive Order 1342. June 17th, I reserved Minnesota marshlands for federal waterfowl breeding grounds. Executive Order 1343, June 19th, I authorized specialized coal mining safety boards for federal reserves. Executive Order 1344, June 21st, I merged several administrative sites in the Arizona-Dixie National Forest for coherent boundary management. Executive Order 1345, June 23rd, I created rules rewarding veterans in civil service promotions. Executive Order 1346, June 25th, I expanded the boundaries of the Lost Trail Forest Reserve in New Mexico. Executive Order 1347, June 27th, I reinstated Clara E. Simmons to the Census Office after an appeal by her regional supervisor. Executive Order 1348, June 29th, I designated lands in Alaska for a cold weather telegraph repeater station. Efficiency in extremes. As summer passed and the leaves turned, I remained focused on laying structural foundations for an efficient government. With every order I signed, I aimed to protect the American landscape, strengthen the civil service, and ensure that our systems of governance were worthy of the people they served. Here are the actions taken during the latter half of 1910. July 1910, Executive Order 1349. July 1st, I reserved land in Arizona Territory for the expansion of Hopi irrigation projects. Water is life in the desert. Executive Order 1350. July 3rd, I authorized stricter sanitary standards in federal prisons to prevent outbreak and preserve dignity. Executive Order 1351. July 5th, I designated the Coconino National Forest Expansion Zone in Arizona, protecting timber against unlawful harvest. Executive Order 1352, July 7th, I reinstated Frank R. Weller to civil service under the Department of War after correcting procedural irregularities. Executive Order 1353, July 9th, I set aside territory in New Mexico for postal and telegraph relay stations, the veins of our growing nation. Executive Order 1354, July 11th, I directed the Geological Survey to conduct a full mineral classification of lands in Utah and Nevada. Executive Order 1355, July 13th, I consolidated land parcels into the Uinta National Forest, simplifying management and fire control efforts. Executive Order 1356, July 15th, I reinstated Lena C. Hubbard to the Bureau of Indian Affairs after congressional review. Executive Order 1357, July 17th, I reserved federal land in Oregon for future use as a coastal signal tower installation. August 1910, Executive Order 1358. August 1st, I initiated plans for federal disaster relief depots in key regions prone to flood and fire. Executive Order 1359. August 4th, I transferred control of surplus Army uniforms to the Department of the Interior for use in Indian schools. Executive Order 1360. August 6th, I reserved additional lands in the Oklahoma Territory for the Osage Nation's grazing needs. Executive Order 1361. August 8th, I ordered updated mapping of Yellowstone National Park boundaries for precision enforcement. Executive Order 1362. August 10th, I authorized pay reform in federal customs stations to prevent corruption and reward merit. Executive Order 1363. August 13th, I reinstated Henry S. Whitcomb to the Naval Records Office. Executive Order 1364. August 16th, I expanded the Rainier National Forest to include vital salmon streams. Executive Order 1365. August 19th, I issued new guidelines for hiring blind and disabled veterans into federal clerical posts. September 1910, Executive Order 1366. September 1st, I authorized new inspection standards at federal quarantine ports along the East Coast. Executive Order 1367, September 3rd, I reinstated Margaret J. Flannery to her post in the Department of the Treasury after a successful grievance. Executive Order 1368, September 6th, I directed the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to draft flood mitigation plans for the Mississippi Delta. Executive Order 1369, September 8th, I reserved desert land in Nevada for study and development of arid farming techniques. Executive Order 1370, September 10th, I created a clerical merit list for promotions in the Department of Agriculture. Executive Order 1371, September 12th, I reinstated Charles A. Ewing to the U.S. Patent Office. Executive Order 1372, September 14th, I directed the minting of commemorative medals for veterans of the Spanish-American War. October 1910, Executive Order 1373. October 1st, I issued new regulations for Indian boarding school dietary standards. Nutrition is essential to education. Executive Order 1374. October 4th, I reserved the lands surrounding Mount Whitney for preservation. Executive Order 1375. October 7th, I ordered that the salaries of federal nurses match those of clerical workers with similar seniority. Executive Order 1376. October 10th, I reinstated Moses T. Kimball to the Department of State Records Bureau. Executive Order 1377. October 13th, I authorized the first federal civil service examination to be administered in Alaska. Executive Order 1378. October 16th, I designated new funding protocols for field botanists employed in national parks. November 1910, Executive Order 1379. November 1st, I ordered lighthouse automation testing at sites in Florida and Maine. Executive Order 1380. November 3rd, I reinstated Selena R. Denton to the Postal Inspection Service. Executive Order 1381. November 6th, I designated experimental land in Texas for drought-resistant crop research. Executive Order 1382. November 9th, I authorized standardized federal forms for timekeeping across departments. Finally, one clock for all. Executive Order 1383. November 12th, I set aside forest land near Mount Hood for future recreational development. December 1910, Executive Order 1384, December 1st, I granted a leave policy for federal workers over the Christmas holiday. A humane state honors human needs. Executive Order 1385, December 5th, I reinstated Augustus B. Leach to the Federal Civil Service following a military service review. Executive Order 1386, December 8th, I established a new reservation for the Navajo Nation in Arizona after tribal petition. Executive Order 1387, December 12th, I created a federal commission to evaluate safety in federal coal mines after several tragic incidents. Executive Order 1388, December 15th, I finalized an order mandating multilingual signs in immigration stations. Executive Order 1389, December 20th, I directed the Library of Congress to begin the Federal Archive Digitization Project, Preserving Our Memory. Executive Order 1390. December 31st, I ended the year by awarding new merit pay to field surveyors mapping America's coasts and interiors. And so, the curtain fell on 1910. I had aimed to preserve the forests, restore the wronged, prepare for the future, and act where action was due. It was a year of precision and purpose. Let us now continue into 1911. Going to go for tea time. See you in a bit.
Thank you all. It's an honor to be here today, continuing this remarkable journey through our nation's executive history. Now, today we look back to the year 1910, and we talk about a man who never chased the headlines but let the weight of his pen reshape the land, President William Howard Taft. In that single year alone, 1910, President Taft issued more than 140 executive orders. That's not just a busy year. That's a masterclass in quiet, effective governance. Let's talk about some of the most important orders from that year and how they're still shaping our country today. In January of 1910, Taft issued orders expanding the Apache and Navajo reservations, restoring lands previously stripped away. That was monumental, a rare act of federal correction in an era when Native voices were too often ignored. And today, those lands remain vital to the cultural and economic survival of these nations. Then in March, Taft established new national forests and redefined the boundaries of others, including what we now know as Montezuma and Sequoia National Forests. These forests still provide clean air, jobs, and climate protection for millions of Americans. He may not have called it climate action, but folks, it was. In August, he expanded civil service protections, authorizing reinstatements for workers unfairly removed. Taft believed in merit, in fairness, and those systems evolved into the modern Office of Personnel Management, which still ensures our federal workforce is based on what you can do, not who you know. By December, he had ordered improved mine safety protocols, following a series of deadly explosions that had claimed lives across coal country. His orders laid early groundwork for the Mine Safety and Health Administration, which continues to protect American workers every single day. But it wasn't just the orders, it was how he governed. Taft believed the presidency was an instrument of law, not theater. He didn't grandstand. He followed the Constitution. He delegated. He listened to the experts. And when he put pen to paper, it meant something. 1910 wasn't loud, but it was powerful. Forests were saved. Workers were protected. Native lands were respected. The civil service was dignified, all without drama. So as we reflect on that pivotal year, let us remember governance doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's the quiet work, the thoughtful, relentless work that endures. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Now let's return to the man himself. Before we hand the mic back to President Taft, here are two fascinating facts about him. One, Taft remains the only person in American history to serve as both President and later Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The man didn't just lead the executive branch, he led the judicial one too. Two, he was the first president to throw out the first pitch at a Major League Baseball game. That's right. Taft may have started more American traditions than we realized. And with that, President Taft, the floor is yours.
The year 1911 was a turning point, not in oratory, but in administrative clarity. I believed in law, not flair, in structure, not spectacle. With every order I signed, I sought to leave the federal government more efficient, more just, and more prepared for the weight of the 20th century. Here is the work I did that year. January 1911, Executive Order 1391. January 2nd, I ordered the reorganization of positions within the Department of the Interior to streamline mineral land surveys, ensuring faster and fairer access to claims. Executive Order 1392, January 5th, I authorized the reinstatement of Louis J. Vann to the Indian Service, having found his removal to be procedurally flawed. Executive Order 1393, January 9th, I set aside land in Arizona for a new reservation for the Yavapai Nation, securing water rights along the Verde River. Executive Order 1394, January 12th, I revised the boundaries of the Shoshone National Forest, adding high-altitude grazing land for sustainable herd support. Executive Order 1395, January 15th, I directed the U.S. Lighthouse Board to install automated fog signal stations along the California coast. February 1911, Executive Order 1400, February 3rd, I expanded the Tonto National Forest in Arizona, protecting headwaters from overlogging. Executive Order 1402, February 10th, I initiated updated classifications for Indian schools, enabling merit-based advancement for educators. Executive Order 1405, February 14th, I designated over 300,000 acres in Oregon as national forest lands, preserving habitat and timber alike. March 1911, Executive Order 1410. March 3rd, I created the Apache National Forest, formally protecting tribal hunting grounds and old-growth ecosystems. Executive Order 1412. March 9th, I reinstated James W. Meager to the U.S. Forest Service, noting irregular dismissal. Executive Order 1415. March 14th, I authorized a federal salary increase for inspectors in the U.S. Mint due to gold verification risks. April 1911, Executive Order 1420. April 4th, I restructured the Panama Canal Zone Civil Service, reducing redundancies and adding engineering oversight. Executive Order 1425. April 12th, I reserved land in Nevada for future aviation experiments. The skies, even then, hinted at their future. Executive Order 1427. April 17th, I mandated the creation of weather shelters across federal ranger stations. May 1911, Executive Order 1432. May 1st, I created a new Indian reservation along the Gila River to safeguard agricultural projects by the Pima people. Executive Order 1435, May 10th, I directed all federal agencies to submit annual reports in duplicate to reduce administrative loss. June 1911, Executive Order 1440, June 2nd, I established the Modoc Forest Reserve in California to counter illegal timber claims. Executive Order 1443, June 12th, I restored former military reservation land in Utah to public domain for homesteading. Executive Order 1445, June 17th, I authorized the construction of new post offices on reserved land in Oklahoma and South Dakota. The latter half of 1911 required the same diligence as the first. Forests were to be guarded, civil service refined, and the machinery of the federal government kept well oiled and quiet. As ever, I governed not to be seen, but to be understood by history. July 1911, Executive Order 1450. July 3rd, I extended protections for the Uinta National Forest in Utah, placing additional restrictions on timber harvesting to preserve watershed integrity. Executive Order 1453. July 9th, I reinstated Margaret J. Kelly to the Classified Postal Service after investigation revealed no wrongdoing on her part. Executive Order 1456, July 14th, I adjusted boundaries in the Sawtooth Reserve in Idaho for better management of mineral claims and grazing rights. August 1911, Executive Order 1461, August 2nd, I created a Weather Signal Corps outpost in eastern Montana to improve storm tracking for agricultural regions. Executive Order 1465, August 10th, I ordered the establishment of employee rest quarters at isolated federal lighthouse stations to reduce illness and attrition. Executive Order 1468, August 18th, I directed the Civil Service Commission to begin annual audits of hiring practices across departments, an early nod to transparency. September 1911, Executive Order 1472, September 5th, I set aside land in New Mexico for the Mescalero Apache, securing sacred land from encroachment. Executive Order 1476, September 13th, I implemented a standard uniform policy across federal park rangers to improve public accountability and identification. Executive Order 1480, September 21st, I updated regulations for postal rail cars, ensuring safer mail transport and standard procedures in emergencies. October 1911. Executive Order 1485. October 1st, I expanded the Angeles National Forest in California, incorporating mountainous terrain vital to Los Angeles water supply. Executive Order 1489. October 9th, I authorized restoration of land in North Dakota to the public domain, originally held for military purposes but never used. Executive Order 1492, October 16th, I reclassified multiple clerical roles in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, paving the way for internal promotion based on education and tribal knowledge. November 1911, Executive Order 1496. November 6th, I declared uniform reporting standards for all custom houses, creating the baseline for today's CBP data systems. Executive Order 1499. November 13th, I reserved land for a veterans convalescent facility in the District of Columbia, noting the long-term wounds beyond the battlefield. December 1911, Executive Order 1503. December 4th, I revised regulations for wireless telegraph stations on government property, marking a formal embrace of radio technology. Executive Order 1507. December 12th, I adjusted salaries across the government printing office, modernizing wages for skilled typesetters and engravers. Executive Order 1510, December 20th, I authorized snow patrol routes along federal trails in Alaska, ensuring mail and aid reached even the remotest outposts during winter. Executive Order 1512, December 28th, I approved a reorganization of naval yard staffing along the Gulf Coast to prepare for expanded shipping traffic. And so 1911 closed, not with ceremony, but with action. I issued orders for forests, for workers, for veterans, for the invisible spine of governance. You may not recall each act, but their effects in preserved lands, protected wages, and procedural fairness still echo through the pages of law today. Quiet work, enduring work. Give me a break, I need a bite.
Good evening, folks. It's a privilege to continue honoring the legacy of our American presidents by reflecting on the quiet but consequential work of President William Howard Taft during the year 1911. Now, Taft wasn't a man who chased headlines. He didn't tweet. He didn't grandstand. What he did do, and do well, was govern with deliberation and integrity. He used the executive order not as a weapon of politics, but as a tool of order, clarity, and fairness. And in 1911, one executive order stands out for its enduring legacy. The most impactful order, expansion of the National Forest System. That year, President Taft issued Executive Order 1410, creating the Apache National Forest, and later expanded others like Angeles and Winta. He preserved hundreds of thousands of acres of pristine wilderness, not for profit, but for posterity. That action, protecting forests in Arizona, California, and Utah, helped establish a foundation for our modern conservation system. Those forests still stand today, protecting wildlife, regulating climate, and providing clean water to millions. And it's not just about trees, it's about legacy, it's about foresight, it's about responsibility. We talk about fighting climate change today, but folks, Taft was doing climate stewardship in his own way more than a century ago. Governing style. Order over noise. 1911 also saw Taft issue executive orders to reform the civil service, adjust Indian land protections, standardize postal infrastructure, and modernize military logistics. He believed the presidency was not about spectacle, but about structure. His orders addressed how government worked, not just what it did. And that's where Taft's influence on us today really shines. Many of the systems we now take for granted, merit-based hiring, national resource management, veterans welfare, and even standardized government reporting, all bear his fingerprints, his legacy in our time. In a time of rapid change, President Taft gave us stability. In an era of industrial chaos, he gave us structure. And in 1911, he governed like a quiet architect, laying bricks we still walk on today. So when you drive through a national forest, or see fairness in federal hiring, or trust that government functions with consistency, you're seeing William Howard Taft's 1911 at work. Thank you for letting me speak today. It's an honor to salute a man who showed us that power doesn't need to shout, Sometimes it just needs to build. And now let's return to the voice of the man himself. But before we do, two quick facts. First, Taft was the only U.S. president to later become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He didn't just serve the Constitution, he interpreted it. And second, he was so committed to fairness that he once walked out of his own swearing in to ensure a witness could be heard. A quiet giant. And now, let's hear from him.
The year 1912 marked the twilight of my presidency, and though the political winds shifted, my commitment to steady governance did not. These final executive orders were not thunderous, but they were precise, just, and made with an enduring sense of duty to the Republic. Let the record of my final year stand as a testament to governance rooted in law and logic. January, March 1912, Executive Order 1516. January 4th, I established regulations for telephone line rights of way across federal lands, a quiet, essential step in preparing for the century of communication. Executive Order 1522. February 8th, I adjusted acreage for the Klamath Indian Reservation in Oregon to restore lost tribal farmland. Executive Order 1526. March 12th, I created the Coconino National Forest by combining adjacent forest lands for more effective conservation management. June 1912, Executive Order 1533. April 5th, I restructured postal routes in Alaska Territory, ensuring reliable delivery during harsh winter conditions. Executive Order 1537. April 18th, I designated land for veterans' burial grounds adjacent to existing military posts, a promise of dignity for those who served. Executive Order 1540. May 2nd, I revised regulations regarding timber export from national forests to curb illegal profit-taking and ensure sustainability. July, September 1912. Executive Order 1547. July 7th, I reclassified several civil service positions, granting advancement opportunities to qualified women in clerical roles. Executive Order 1552. August 13th, I created new grazing permit rules in New Mexico Territory to prevent overuse of highland pastures. Executive Order 1555. September 6th, I ordered the standardization of uniforms for federal customs officers, fostering professionalism and deterring impersonation. October-December 1912, Executive Order 1560. October 1st, I authorized the preservation of culturally significant native sites on public land. Among the earliest executive moves toward heritage protection, Executive Order 1565, November 9th, I expanded boundaries of Zuni Indian Reservation in New Mexico to include ceremonial lands previously misclassified. Executive Order 1570, December 4th, my final significant order, I directed the General Land Office to digitize mineral surveys and patent records, laying groundwork for modern land information systems. And so 1912 marked not only the close of my administration, but the continuation of a philosophy that law must be administered not with arrogance, but with discipline. That government is not performance. It is performance of duty. That legacy is not noise. It is structure that endures. With these final acts, I took my leave from the White House with no regret, no bitterness. I had served, as I had sworn, to preserve, protect, and defend. Well, after 4 years of executive orders, timber deeds, and civil service memos, I must confess, I need a bath, chuckles gently. But before I go, let me leave you with the words I govern by, the creed that steadied my hand through storm and stillness alike. For democracy I live for democracy I die for. May it ever endure.
Folks, we've walked through every year of President William Howard Taft's time in office. And I got to tell you, I think we owe the man a whole lot more credit than history sometimes gives him. Taft wasn't flashy. He wasn't a headline chaser. He wasn't interested in theatrics. He was interested in function, in law, in order, in preserving the dignity of American institutions, from protecting native lands and conserving forests to modernizing civil service and safeguarding worker rights. His executive orders built the very scaffolding of the federal government we rely on today. Even now, more than a century later, you'll find echoes of Taft in the rules that govern our land offices, our national parks, our hiring practices, and even our armed services. But more than that, Taft gave us an example of restraint, of focus, and of fidelity to the Constitution, even when it wasn't popular. So I say this, let's amplify his efforts, not just with words, but with action. Let's carry forward the work of quiet builders. Let's remember that democracy doesn't just survive on noise. It thrives on service, on duty, on doing the hard work when no one's watching. Because as Taft might remind us, power is best used when it protects, not when it performs. Thank you all for being a part of this tribute. And let's keep walking the path these men carved, not in their shadow, but in their light. And now I pass it to you, to a millions y'all, encouraging you watching, listening, learning, the citizens, the students, the thinkers, the doers. Carry this history forward. Speak it, share it. Let it guide your actions, your decisions, your leadership, however big or small. Because William Howard Taft didn't just leave a mark, he left a blueprint. And it's up to us, all of us, to build on it. For democracy we live for democracy we die for. Good night, and God bless the United States of America. Folks, as we move forward through time, there's a name we can't skip, a man who didn't just live through history, he wrote it and rewrote parts of America with it. Now look, Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States, came into office at a moment when the world was changing fast, industry was booming, war was brewing, and the American people were demanding more than just speeches. They wanted vision, they wanted structure, and they wanted justice. Wilson came in with a scholar's mind and a reformer's heart. He expanded the federal government's role in everyday life through economics, labor, civil service, and global diplomacy. His executive orders, they didn't just fill the record books, they redefined how presidents use the pen to shape policy, regulate industry, and prepare a country for the unknown. Now, I won't sugarcoat it. Wilson's legacy is complicated. He built systems that empowered millions, and at the same time, he upheld structures that excluded far too many. But that's the thing about history. It's never one-sided. It demands understanding, accountability, and perspective. So before we dive into the orders, the policies, the impact, let's give the floor to the man himself, a former university president turned commander-in-chief, whose vision still echoes across our laws and institutions to this very day. President Woodrow Wilson, the mic is yours.
My fellow Americans, permit me a moment to speak not merely as a former president, but as a man shaped by faith, study, and the pressures of a world in flux. I was born in Staunton, Virginia in 1856, the son of a Presbyterian minister. My upbringing was steeped in discipline, duty, and an unyielding belief in the power of moral reasoning. The Civil War marked my earliest memories, not from the battlefield, but from the pulpit, the whispers of sorrow, and the long road to national reconciliation. Education became my compass. I studied at Princeton, earned my PhD from Johns Hopkins, the first and only president to do so, and eventually returned to Princeton as its president. I believed then, as I do now, that ideas have weight and leadership must be informed by intellect as much as conviction. In 1910, I stepped into public office for the first time as governor of New Jersey. There, I earned a reputation for challenging political machines and enacting progressive reforms. The people took notice, and in 1912, I was elected the 28th President of the United States. My time in office was marked by profound transformation. We tackled tariffs, overhauled the banking system, passed child labor laws, and created the Federal Trade Commission. We fought for workers' rights, brought fairness to commerce, and redefined the federal government's role in protecting the common man. But perhaps most defining was the shadow of war. I led our nation through the crucible of World War I, not in pursuit of conquest, but in defense of democracy. My dream was not merely victory, but peace, a league of nations that would guard against future global bloodshed. Not all dreams are realized in one lifetime, but I stand here knowing that each chapter of my service was driven by duty, to govern wisely, to reform boldly, and to dream globally. Now, in the next breath, we'll speak of the specific instruments of governance, the executive orders and proclamations, which carried these principles into action. But first, I thank you for listening, not just to my voice, but to the past itself. As President of the United States in the year of our Lord 1913, I undertook a series of executive orders and proclamations in service to the people and the functions of government. On March 10th, I signed Executive Order 1744, reaffirming Mabel P. Leroy, clerk in the Interior Department, to sign land patents in my name. A week later, on March 17th, through Proclamation 1237, I convened an extra session of Congress to address pressing national needs. On November 21st, I established rules for the measurement of vessels in the Panama Canal with Proclamation 1258, ensuring fairness in that international waterway. On March 11th, I issued Executive Order 1745, designating Charles Earl to act as Secretary of Labor in times of absence. On March 14th, I signed Executive Order 1746, revoking a prior order and placing lands in Alaska under the Signal Corps for military use. On March 17th, through Order 1747, I created the Pine Mountain Administrative Site in Oregon as a ranger station for Forest Service. Edward H. Hayden was granted civil service appointment eligibility via Order 1748 on March 18th. On March 19th, I signed Order 1749, protecting birds and their nests in the Canal Zone. That same day, Order 1750 was issued to modify the application of the Safety Appliance Acts addressing rail safety. On March 20th, I amended a previous executive order related to the estates of deceased and insane persons through Order 1751. Also that day, I issued Order 1752 relating to foreign corporations. On March 21st, Order 1752 and a half revoked a recent land office change in South Dakota. Martin A. Knapp was designated as chairman of the Interstate Commerce Commission through Order 1753 on March 22nd. Also on that day, Mary K. Gulick was appointed land patent signer by Order 1754. On March 24th, I suspended Order 1722 and a half concerning claims in the Panama Canal by issuing Order 1755. That same day, I amended Order 1719, adjusting a land transfer between South Dakota districts under Order 1756. On March 26th, I signed Order 1757, prescribing penal bonds for public moneys receivers. On March 31st, Charles P. Neal was designated as Acting Labor Secretary by Order 1758. On April 15th, Orders 1759 and 1760 restructured land districts in North Dakota, including a full consolidation of Fargo and Bismarck. Also on April 15th, I enacted maritime quarantine regulations for the Canal Zone under Order 1761. On April 18th, I withdrew Oregon lands for future park legislation via Order 1762. On April 21st, I reserved Walker Lake in Arkansas as a bird preserve through Order 1763 and granted lands near Cluckwan, Alaska to indigenous use under Order 1764. I further modified Order 1661 involving Port Angeles, Washington with Order 1765. That same day, Theodore T. Kirk was made eligible for Navy Department appointment by Order 1766. On April 28th, I enlarged Fort Ruger in Hawaii with Order 1767. Civil service rules were adjusted on April 23rd and May 1st via Orders 1768, 1769, and 1770, enabling appointments and transfers for various personnel, including Mary E. Netherland. On May 5th, Swendal A. Swenson was authorized for civil service under Order 1771. On May 6, Order 1772, 1773, 1774, and 1775 dealt with land reservations for the Nevada or Colony Indians, land transfers in Montana, and the establishment of Petit Bois Island as a bird preserve. On May 7th, I signed Orders 1776, 1777, and 1778, continuing reforms in postmaster appointment rules. John E. Hollingsworth and Romus F. Stewart were reinstated as post office inspectors by Orders 1779 and 1780. On May 27th, Albert Lee Thurman was designated Acting Commerce Secretary via Order 1781. Finally, on June 2nd, I signed Order 1782, enlarging the Gila River Indian Reservation in Arizona. On June 30th, I issued Executive Order 1792, which authorized jury trials in the Canal Zone, a step toward fairer legal proceedings for our overseas territories. On July 3rd, Order 1794 withdrew public lands in Alabama, pending their classification for a potential forest purchase area. On July 18th, I revoked a prior reservation for the Wallapai Indians through Order 1798, adjusting land use priorities. On July 23rd, Order 1803 amended civil service rules to accept the private secretary to the public printer from examination, a small but necessary administrative revision. On August 2nd, Order 1808 made a similar exception for temporary detective employees in the Internal Revenue Service. On August 7th, I signed Order 1810 prohibiting unauthorized use of flying machines, acknowledging the emerging importance of aviation. On August 9th, I appointed Richard Lee Metcalf to the Isthmian Canal Commission by Order 1812. On August 29th, Order 1817 revised regulations on bail bonds and deposits in the canal zone and amended criminal procedure. On September 4th, I signed Order 1819, establishing Anaho Island Reservation as a preserve for native bird species. On September 22nd, Order 1829 updated civil service rules to clarify exemptions in the Department of Agriculture. On September 25th, I issued Order 1832, implementing penalties for deported persons who unlawfully returned to the canal zone. On September 30th, Order 1833.5 discontinued the use of roller towels and shared towels in federal buildings, a sanitary reform. On October 14th, I adjusted examination criteria for junior clerks in the Office of Indian Affairs through Order 1837. On October 29th, I signed Order 1851, modifying civil service rules once again for positions accepted from examination at the Interstate Commerce Commission. On November 7th, through Order 1857, I regulated the carrying of arms within the canal zone, a matter of security and civil control. On November 11th, I signed Order 1860, fixing the rate of interest on money, a necessary financial directive, and on November 28th, I issued Order 1862, requiring that new structures and certain artistic matters in Washington, D.C. be reviewed by the Commission of Fine Art to preserve the dignity of our capital's architecture. In the final days of the year, I issued 2 concluding civil service actions. On December 22nd, Order 1874 granted Albert K. Brown eligibility for promotion outside normal examination standards. And finally, Order 1875 granted Anita H. Stevens a similar exemption, an affirmation of merit and need over rigid formality. These executive orders and proclamations, though modest in their individual scope, collectively shaped the administrative framework of a modern nation. And with that, my good citizens, I shall retire for a moment, perhaps enjoy a quiet round of billiards in the West Wing study, as was my custom. The hour now passes to President Joseph R. Biden, Jr., who will offer his reflections on the effects and consequences of these executive orders and proclamations. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Wilson, and good evening, folks. Now look, 1913 was a different time. The world was on the cusp of change, and Woodrow Wilson walked into the White House with a vision for modernizing the federal government. And in that very first year, he signed a long list of executive orders and proclamations. A lot of them might seem small on the surface, but some of these decisions still echo through history today. Let me break down just a few of the ones that still matter. Order 1237, convening an extra session of Congress. That wasn't just procedure, that was urgency. Wilson needed lawmakers focused on economic reform and tariff reduction, and that set the stage for the Federal Reserve Act passed later that year. I know a thing or two about using every tool available to move things forward. Order 1258, vessel measurement for the Panama Canal. That was about fairness, making sure no one nation could game the system. Those rules still influence how ships are classified today. That's legacy. Order 1749, protecting birds in the canal zone. Believe it or not, that was one of our earliest executive actions on wildlife conservation, a precursor to modern protections in U.S. territories and overseas. Order 1761, maritime quarantine in the canal zone. Wilson recognized the danger of disease spreading via trade routes. Sound familiar? Today, public health and port inspection systems build on decisions like this one. Orders 1763, 1775, and 1819. Bird reserves Wilson established several federal wildlife sanctuaries. Places like Walker Lake, Petit Bois Island, and Anaho Island became early models for the National Wildlife Refuge System, which now protects hundreds of species across the country. Order 1782, Gila River Indian Reservation, Arizona, enlarged. This was a direct action to support Native American land rights. It mattered then, and it matters now. Our administration continues working to honor and expand those commitments. Order 1792, jury trials in the canal zone, that gave people, even in far-flung territories, the right to a fair trial. Rule of law doesn't stop at the coastline. Order 1810, banning unauthorized use of flying machines. Now that sounds funny today, but in 1913, air travel was brand new. And Wilson saw early on that the sky wasn't a lawless place. He laid groundwork for aviation regulation long before the FAA was ever imagined. Order 1832, punishing deported persons who returned to the Canal Zone that was an early immigration enforcement tool. And while our understanding of justice and fairness has evolved, the foundation of border security policy started there. Order 1833 and a half, discontinuing roller towels hygiene reform. During a time of industrial growth and crowded federal buildings, this simple order helped shape modern sanitary standards in government spaces. Order 1857, regulating firearms in the Canal Zone. Wilson used his authority to manage public safety in U.S. territories. Sound policy then, and still a hot topic today. Order 1862, submitting D.C. structures to the Commission of Fine Art. You ever look at the monuments and buildings in Washington and think, wow, this place has a certain elegance? That's partly because of Wilson. From that moment forward, we built with beauty and purpose. And now, before I go, did you know President Wilson was a fierce competitor at the pool table? Loved the game. Said it kept his mind sharp and his aim steady. He was also a voracious reader, especially of classical philosophy and history. He once said, the world must be made safe for democracy. But I'd say he also made democracy smarter, sharper, and just a bit more precise, shot by shot. Thank you, folks. And thank you, Mr. Wilson.
As President of these United States, I hereby record the following executive orders and proclamations issued in the year of our Lord, 1914. Mother's Day Proclamation, May 9, 1914. Declaring rules for maintenance of neutrality of Panama Canal and Panama Canal Zone, November 13, 1914. Oregon, withdrawal of certain described lands, January 14, 1914. Creation of Allen Administrative Site, Montana, January 14, 1914. Colorado, withdrawal of lands for City of Black Hawk, January 16, 1914. Edith P. Johnson exemption from civil service rules, January 19, 1914. Canal Zone anti-corruption regulations, January 21, 1914, Francis H. Duhay, Civil Service Exemption. January 24, 1914, Eliza Ryan, Civil Service Exemption. January 24, 1914, revoking portions of Executive Order 1324.5. January 24, 1914, prohibiting fire hunting at night in Canal Zone. January 27, 1914, establishing permanent organization for Panama Canal. January 27, 1914, conditions of employment for canal workers. February 2, 1914, establishment of Panama Canal Washington office, March 2, 1914. Canal Zone Judiciary Reorganization, March 12, 1914. Adjustment of Panama Canal worker claims, March 20, 1914. Utah lands reserved for Goshute and other Indians, March 23, 1914. Panama Canal toll and service billing regulations, April 16, 1914. Alaskan lands reserved for town site, April 21, 1914. Land near Klawock, Alaska reserved for education, April 21, 1914. Relating to salaries of consular officers, April 30, 1914. Pardons and remission of fines, May 13, 1914. Committee to formally open Panama Canal, May 20, 1914. Balboa Naval Radio Station, May 26, 1914. Modify oil royalty rates for Osage Reservation, June 1, 1914. Smith Island Bird Reservation, June 6, 1914. Amending Civil Service Transfer Rules, June 15, 1914. Duties of District Court Clerk and Assistant, July 3, 1914. Wireless requirement for ocean vessels, July 9, 1914. Board of Measurement Authority, July 9, 1914. Panama Canal Navigation Rules, July 9, 1914. Military Reservation for National Guard, July 23, 1914. Amending Alien Appointment Rules, July 25, 1914. Inspection of Corporate Tax Returns, July 28, 1914. Reinstatement of J. N. Gilbert to IRS, July 28, 1914. Darien Naval Radio Station, July 30, 1914. Prescribing duties of constables, August 3, 1914. Enforce neutrality of wireless stations, August 5, 1914. Relief and transport for Americans in Europe, August 5, 1914. Board of Relief for Stranded Americans, August 6, 1914. Reorganize Canal Zone, Board of Health, August 6, 1914, relating to the Customs Service. August 8, 1914, Customs Enforcement to Treasury Department. August 8, 1914, Postal Crimes in the Canal Zone. August 14, 1914, Security for Costs in Civil Cases. August 14, 1914, Amending Maritime Quarantine Regulations. August 14, 1914, Amending Passport Rules. August 14, 1914, Temporary Waiver of Passport Fees. August 14th, 1914. Chukachansi, August 14th, 1914. Lookout Station at Twin Sisters, Colorado, August 17th, 1914, regulating operation of streetcars. August 22nd, 1914, transfer of Dead Man's Island to Health Service. August 26th, 1914, Customs Collection District designation. August 27th, 1914, amendment to Canal Operation Rules. September 3rd, 1914, foreign ships admitted to American Registry. September 4th, 1914, repealing postal savings in Canal Zone. September 5th, 1914, taking over high power radio station. September 5th, 1914. 1914. Amending punishment regulations for enlisted men. September 5th, 1914. Appointing war risk insurance experts. September 10th, 1914. Combining Manzano and Zuni forests. September 10th, 1914. Ranger Station near Coconino, Arizona. September 15th, 1914. Land reserved for elk refuge. September 15th, 1914. Divide site in Oregon National Forest. September 15th, 1914. Amend Canal Zone, Gambling Law. September 18th, 1914. Amend compensation for canal employees. September 19th, 1914. Alaskan Town Site Withdrawal Number 4, October 8th, 1914. License taxes and fees, October 13th, 1914. Grays Lake Admin Site, Caribou Forest, October 28th, 1914. Amending Panama Canal Operation Rules, November 4th, 1914. Consolidating Vermont Customs Districts, November 21st, 1914. Calvin Satterfield, eligible for DOJ appointment, December 30th, 1914. Let the record so stand. This is the labor of executive governance in the year 1914. Let's talk to Joe Biden about which orders meant the most to y'all. I'm busy writing my memoirs. Be right back.
My fellow American, I want to take a moment tonight not just to talk about the future, but to honor the past. A past that shaped the very institutions, protections, and values we hold dear today. Let's journey back to 1914, a year not just of global tension, but of profound presidential foresight. President Woodrow Wilson, in that pivotal year, issued over 70 executive orders and proclamations, many of which might seem like small brushstrokes in the painting of American history. But if you look closer, these were the brushstrokes that outlined the canvas of modern governance. On Mother's Day and American values, take Executive Order 1268. The Mother's Day Proclamation signed May 9th, 1914. Now, that wasn't just a holiday being added to the calendar. It was a national recognition of compassion, of nurturing, of family. A mother's love, universal, irreplaceable. Wilson honored that. Today, over a century later, we still mark that Sunday each May, not just with cards and flowers, but with gratitude for the bedrock of American families. On the Panama Canal and global responsibility. But Wilson didn't stop there. He laid down an entirely new framework for how America would interact with the world. The Panama Canal wasn't just a feat of engineering. It was a symbol of global commerce, diplomacy, and responsibility. Through orders like 1287, 1885, 1888, 1897, and 1990, Wilson established rules for neutrality, worker protections, judiciary reforms, and operational logistics for the Canal Zone. Think about that. In the midst of a world spiraling toward war, America created rules of fair play, neutrality, and safety for a strategic trade artery. And to this day, those values echo in our maritime laws, in our diplomatic treaties, and in the way we handle infrastructure, not just for ourselves, but for the world. On civil service and equality of opportunity. Now, some of those orders, Edith P., Johnson, Francis Duhay, Eliza Ryan, exempting folks from civil service rules, at first glance bureaucratic. But zoom in, and you see a government wrestling with fairness, merit, and evolving standards for public service. That tension between expertise and opportunity still shapes our hiring policies today. We're building on it now with equity-based hiring, veterans' preferences, and efforts to ensure that every qualified American gets a shot. On radio, passports, and postal security, the rise of modern communication. Wilson looked to the future. Orders like the establishment of the Balboa and Darien naval radio stations and the enforcement of neutrality for wireless stations, those weren't just wartime precautions. They were the seeds of our modern FCC, our global information ethics, and our digital national security. And when he amended passport rules, waived emergency fees, and reformed postal crimes in the Canal Zone. That was about protecting people, ensuring security, and recognizing that communication was becoming the lifeblood of modern life. That's the same fight we take on today when we protect net neutrality, fight misinformation, and invest in broadband for every home in America. On immigration, foreign vessels, and trade. He amended rules for hiring foreign-born applicants. He opened American registry to foreign-built ships. He managed customs appointments in far-flung districts. These weren't just transactional decisions. They were acknowledgments that America's strength would lie in her openness, in her ports, in her people. And as we deal today with supply chain resilience, workforce diversity, and fair trade, we are walking a path Wilson began to pave. On environment, land, and indigenous rights. Executive orders like the reservation of land for the Goshoot tribe in Utah, or the Elk Refuge in Oregon, or Smith Island set aside for birds. These were among the earliest federal actions linking governance to environmental stewardship and indigenous justice. Now, here we are in 2025, continuing that legacy, conserving lands, investing in tribal sovereignty, and fighting the climate crisis with the urgency it demands. On war relief and humanity in action. And then came August 1914. The Great War had begun in Europe, and Wilson's orders, 2012 and 2013, sent aid to stranded Americans, organized boards for relief and evacuation. We see echoes of that today. Every time FEMA responds, every time we airlift citizens out of crisis zones, every time America's compassion becomes our foreign policy. On legacy and continuity. All in all, Wilson's pen in 1914 didn't just sign directives. It signed ideals into motion: government transparency, public health, naval communication, employment reform, international neutrality, land conservation, war relief, motherhood. We don't often talk about these executive orders in classrooms or on cable news, but we live in the nation they helped build, quietly, steadily, systematically. That's the enduring work of governance, and it's our sacred responsibility to continue it. So when you think about 1914, don't just think of Europe's battles or a distant past. Think of how one president's decisions ripple into our lives today. That's continuity, that's leadership, that's America. May we honor it, may we learn from it, and may we lead with it.
I, Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, do hereby proclaim the following executive orders and proclamations issued under my administration in the year 1915. Executive Order 2114. Fred W. Carrington made eligible for promotion from Assistant Messenger in the Pensions Bureau to the clerical grade without examination. January 5, 1915. Executive Order 2118. Amendment of Executive Order No. 1761 prescribing maritime quarantine regulations for the Canal Zone. January 11, 1915. Executive Order 2119A, Rules governing the granting and issuing of passports in the United States. January 12, 1915. Executive Order 2120, Conditions of Employment governing employees of the Panama Canal. January 15, 1915. Executive Order 2121, amending the Civil Service Rules. January 19, 1915. Executive Order 2135, establishing regulations governing Treasury. Accounting for Panama Canal collections. February 4, 1915. Executive Order 2138, Military Reservation for National Guard. February 19, 1915. Executive Order 2142, relative to the production and use of opium and coca leaves in the Canal Zone, March 1, 1915. Executive Order 2152, reinstatement of Dr. Edward P. Beverly in the Panama Canal Service, March 23, 1915. Executive Order 2164, vessel registrations, May 15, 1915. Executive Order 2185, renaming the Panama Canal's Culebra Cut to Gaylord Cut, June 8, 1915. Executive Order 2204, Panama Canal Employee Rent and Fuel Regulations, May 25, 1915. Executive Order 2208, Flag of the Governor of the Panama Canal Zone, June 8, 1915. Executive Order 2212, White River National Forest, Colorado, June 15, 1915. Executive Order 2230, establishing Big Lake Reservation, Arkansas, as a preserve and breeding ground for native birds, August 2nd, 1915. Executive Order 2230.5. Eligibility of Norma H. Spencer for Treasury Clerk without civil service rules, August 5th, 1915. Executive Order 2231. Eligibility of Francis J. Reinhardt for Law Clerk, Treasury Department, August 6, 1915. Executive Order 2233. Withdrawal of lands at Coos Bay, Oregon for military purposes, August 6, 1915. Executive Order 2234. Withdrawal of lands in the Philippine Islands for military purposes, August 13, 1915. Executive Order 2245. Eligibility of James O. Brockenshire as Inspector of Musical Instruments in the Army Quartermaster Corps, September 14, 1915. Executive Order 2245.5. Civil Service Rules waived for the appointment, September 14, 1915. Executive Order 2246. Lands in Alabama bordering the Tennessee River temporarily withdrawn for War Department use, September 17, 1915. Executive Order 2247.5. Eligibility of Edith Gilbert, Leadley to clerical position in the Commerce Department without civil service rules, September 22, 1915. Executive Order 2248. Eligibility of Shelley Inch as clerk in Placerville, California. Post Office, September 23, 1915. Executive Order 2262. Consular Regulations for maintaining the rights and enforcing the duties of American sailors in foreign ports, October 21, 1915. Executive Order 2268, establishing a United States Sheep Experiment Station, October 30, 1915. Executive Order 2269, suspending operation of the Act promoting welfare of American seamen and prohibiting arrest for desertion, November 2, 1915. Executive Order 2281, lands in Alabama, reserved for military purposes, December 6, 1915. Executive Order 2285. Requiring American citizens traveling abroad to procure passports, December 15, 1915. Executive Order 2286. Reinstatement of Arabella N. McDonald in the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, December 16, 1915. Executive Order 2286-A. Regulations governing the granting and issuing of passports in the United States, December 16, 1915. Executive Order 2287, diminishment of Coconino National Forest, Arizona, December 18, 1915. Executive Order 2294, lands in Oklahoma reserved for agency and educational use in connection with the Cheyenne and Arapaho Indian Agency, December 29, 1915. Proclamation number 1318. Setting aside the Walnut Canyon National Monument, Arizona, November 30, 1915. Let these orders serve as instruments of national progress and as enduring reflections of our constitutional commitment to duty, discipline, and the welfare of the people. I'm going to take a break. See you after this round.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Today, I want to take us back, not just to revisit the events of history, but to understand how some decisions made over 100 years ago still echo in our daily lives. Let's talk about 1915, the second full year of President Woodrow Wilson's administration. Now, Wilson signed dozens of executive orders that year. Some were small, others historic, but several stand out, not just for their time, but for how they shaped the kind of government and society we still rely on today. Passports, national identity, and global citizenship. Let's start with Executive Order 2119A and 2286A. These orders laid down the foundation for the modern passport system in the United States. Before these, travel abroad didn't require standardized documentation. But with World War I engulfing Europe, Wilson's administration acted. They issued clear rules for how passports were to be granted. Then came Executive Order 2285. Requiring all American citizens traveling abroad to carry passports. Today, your blue passport is more than a travel document. It's a symbol of your rights, your security, and your connection to the rule of law. These policies made that possible. They protected our citizens abroad then, and they do the same now. Canal Zone and federal accountability. Now, you might not think about the Panama Canal every day, but back in 1915, it was the beating heart of global commerce. Wilson issued Executive Order 2135, creating regulations for how funds collected in the Canal Zone would be reported to the U.S. Treasury. That's federal transparency in action. In that same spirit, Executive Order 2204 regulated rent and fuel prices for workers in the Canal Zone, a rare early example of the federal government stepping in to protect essential workers. Today, when we talk about worker protections or debate how public funds should be handled, we're standing on the shoulders of those administrative reforms. Wilson's orders gave structure to an emerging bureaucracy that had to answer to the people. Conservation and wildlife protection. Another one I want to highlight is Executive Order 2230, which established the Big Lake Reservation in Arkansas as a preserve and breeding ground for native birds, and Proclamation 1318, setting aside Walnut Canyon National Monument in Arizona. These actions helped birth the American conservation ethic. They weren't just about land or birds. They were about the responsibility we hold for future generations. When you visit a national park, hear the call of a migratory bird, or see an endangered species protected, it's because of the roots Wilson planted: civil service exceptions and social access. Now, I want to speak on a more nuanced matter: the civil service exemptions. Orders like 2114, 2230.5, and 2247.5 gave individuals, often women and working-class Americans, a path into federal service without going through the usual exams or gatekeeping mechanisms. Today, these kinds of special exceptions might raise questions, and they should, but back then, they opened doors for people who had the skills but not the privilege. We see their legacy today in diversity hiring, veterans preference, and merit-based exceptions that still honor equity. Sailor rights, seaman protection, and the birth of labor standards. Wilson also understood the hardships of the working man. With Executive Order 2262, he laid out consular regulations to protect American sailors in foreign ports. Just days later, he signed Executive Order 2269, suspending a harsh law that allowed sailors to be jailed for desertion. Let that sink in. And 100 years ago, a sailor could be imprisoned simply for leaving their post. Wilson saw the injustice, and he acted. That same spirit led to the labor protections we enjoy now, from OSHA to maritime labor codes to worker safety laws. The seed of empathy was planted in orders like these. Rural innovation, the U.S. Sheep Experiment Station. One of the most overlooked but fascinating acts was Executive Order 2268, establishing the United States Sheep Experiment Station. Now, that may not sound dramatic, but this was a massive investment in rural innovation. It supported American farmers, protected our food supply, and fueled decades of research in livestock health and wool production. You want to talk about Build Back Better? Wilson built forward smarter. This order helped shape modern agricultural science. Military preparation and national security. He also withdrew land in Alabama, Oregon, and the Philippines for military and national security use. Executive Orders 2246, 2233, and 2234. As war crept closer to America's doorstep, Wilson quietly prepared. These orders remind us that national readiness doesn't start with the sound of a trumpet. It starts with land deeds, administrative foresight, and infrastructure planning. Closing thoughts. 1915 wasn't a flashy year. There were no moon landings or Manhattan projects, but it was a year of foresight, ethics, and incremental change. Wilson's pen wrote orders that gave us protection abroad, structure at home, fairness in hiring, sanctuary for wildlife, and dignity for sailors and workers. Today, in 2025, we're still benefiting from that work, and that's the power of democracy, not just in the moment, but in the memory, in what we choose to carry forward. So when you look at a passport, walk through a national monument, or receive fair treatment at your job, thank those who wrote quietly, signed with purpose, and governed not for applause, but for legacy. God bless you, and may we always honor the quiet power of good governance.
As President of the United States, I hereby record the following executive orders and proclamations issued under my hand during the year 1916. Each was signed in the spirit of public service, national security, or constitutional duty. Executive Order 2295, certain described lands in Arizona, reserved as a rifle range for the Tucson and University of Arizona Rifle Clubs, January 1, 1916. Executive Order 2300, further reserving additional described lands for use by the Papago Indians, Arizona, January 14, 1916. Executive Order 2303, abolishing port of entry at Charlotte, New York, January 28, 1916. Executive Order 2304, withdrawing a strip of land from Sturgeon Bay Reservation for public road extension, Door County, Wisconsin, January 28, 1916. Executive Order 2316, Camp Eldridge, Philippine Islands, reserving additional lands for military purposes, February 14, 1916. Executive Order 2322, transfer of lands in Puerto Rico from War Department to Navy Department for naval radio purposes, February 21, 1916. Executive Order 2323, transfer of lands at Fort Armstrong, Hawaii from Navy Department to War Department, February 21, 1916. Executive Order 2325, amending Executive Order of February 14, 1912, February 23, 1916. Executive Order 2328, transfer of lands at Fort Rosecrans, California, between War and Navy Departments, February 25, 1916. Executive Order 2335, restoring military lands to the territory of Hawaii, March 6, 1916. Executive Order 2341, relating to cancellation and reissue of passports, March 13, 1916. Executive Order 2345, increasing the strength of the regular Army, March 21, 1916. Executive Order 2357, amending civil service rules to allow enlisted men to participate in examinations, April 11, 1916. Executive Order 2362-A, amending rules governing the granting and issuing of passports, April 17, 1916. Executive Order 2377, restoring control of Fort Brown, Texas to the War Department, May 2, 1916. Executive Order 2382, protection of the Panama Canal during time of war, May 17, 1916. Executive Order 2390, defining the flag of the United States and the presidential flag, May 29, 1916. Executive Order 2392, restoring certain lands and transferring control to the Department of the Interior, June 5, 1916. Executive Order 2410, authorizing appointments of Warren J. Brown, Henry C. Mansfield, and Florence E. Cleveland to classified clerk positions, June 30, 1916. Executive Order 2413, waiving citizenship requirements for certain federal appointments, June 30, 1916. Executive Order 2415, modifying boundaries of Datil National Forest, New Mexico, excluding former Hot Springs Indian Reservation, July 3, 1916. Executive Order 2418, regulations for the sale of federal and cliff additions to Seward Townsite, Alaska, July 11, 1916. Executive Order 2428, conditions for use of quarters, fuel, and electricity by Panama Canal and Panama Railroad employees, July 25, 1916. Executive Order 2440, modification of Executive Order 2428 regarding utilities for Canal Zone workers, August 10, 1916. Executive Order 2451, regulations concerning motor vehicles in the roads of the Canal Zone, September 5, 1916. Executive Order 2455, administration of the Federal Employees Compensation Act in the Panama Canal Zone, September 15, 1916. Executive Order 2456, requiring Governor General of the Philippines to report to the Secretary of War, September 19, 1916. Executive Order 2461, amending Consular Regulation 172, September 28, 1916. Executive Order 2462, amending Consular Regulation 692, September 28, 1916. Executive Order 2475, authorizing the commutation of leave privileges in certain cases, October 17, 1916. Executive Order 2479, providing for interest payments on deposit money orders in the Canal Zone, October 22, 1916. Executive Order 2493, extending the trust period on allotments for absentee Shawnee and citizen Potawatomi Indians, Oklahoma. November 24, 1916. Executive Order 2496, diminishment of Coronado National Forest, Arizona. December 7, 1916. Executive Order 2497, land withdrawal in Wyoming for public water supply purposes. December 7, 1916. Executive Order 2498, prescribing Army punishment regulations. During time of peace, December 16, 1916. Executive Order 2499, William C. Rader exempted from civil service rules for appointment, December 20, 1916. Executive Order 2500, Hattie M. Miller made eligible for promotion without examination, December 20, 1916. Proclamation number 1340, setting aside Capulin Mountain National Monument, New Mexico, August 9, 1916. Let the year 1916 be remembered not solely for its conflicts abroad, but for the governance at home, orders and proclamations rooted in security, conservation, equity, and infrastructure. May they continue to serve the people of this great republic. I'm going to take another break. See you after this rec.
Folks, I want to take a moment tonight to talk about something you don't hear about on the evening news. Something quiet, something historic. I'm talking about the executive orders and proclamations issued in 1916 by President Woodrow Wilson. Now, some of you might ask, Joe, why go all the way back to 1916? Because the work done then, the decisions made through ink on parchment, still ripple through our laws, our landscapes, our labor force, and our national character. Defining the flag of the United States, EO 2390. Let's start with one that touches every schoolroom, every courthouse, every soldier's heart, Executive Order 2390. In May of 1916, President Wilson officially defined the design of the American flag and also the presidential flag. Think about that. We were entering a century of global leadership, and this order gave the stars and stripes and the seal of the commander-in-chief their dignity, their uniformity, and their legal standing. Today, when we lower that flag to half-staff, when we honor our veterans, when we inaugurate a president, it's not just symbolism. It's a solemn act rooted in 1916. It reminds us who we are. Capulin Mountain National Monument, Proclamation 1340. That same year, Wilson signed Proclamation 1340, establishing Capulin Mountain National Monument in New Mexico. It might seem like a small thing, a dormant volcano out in the west, but it wasn't just about a mountain. It was a declaration that America's natural wonders were worth preserving, that we're not just here to consume the land, but to protect it. Today, we still walk those volcanic trails. Students learn geology there. Families camp under starlit skies. That's legacy. That's forward-thinking conservation. Reform in civil service and military opportunity. Executive Order 2357 and Executive Order 2500. Now here's one that changed people's lives. Executive Order 2357, which allowed enlisted men to take federal exams. Before that, if you wore a uniform, your path into civil service was blocked. Wilson opened that door. And then there's Executive Order 2500, which promoted Hattie M. Miller, exempting her from examination rules. That mattered. Women didn't have many paths into federal service in 1916, but Wilson saw fit to make one for her. Today we talk about veterans' preference, women in government, equal opportunity. These seeds were planted back then, quietly, righteously. Passport reform, Executive Orders 2341 and 2362-A. Folks, in the midst of global uncertainty, Wilson also signed Executive Orders 2341 and 2362-A, reforming how passports were issued, reissued, and managed. That may sound dry, but it meant Americans traveling abroad were safer, traceable, and protected under law. The modern U.S. passport system, which millions rely on today, started here. Military preparedness and peacekeeping, Executive Order 2345 and Executive Order 2382. Let's talk defense. EO 2345 increased the strength of the regular Army, and Executive Order 2382 laid out measures to protect the Panama Canal during wartime. These weren't acts of aggression, they were acts of foresight. Wilson understood the world was changing, that America had responsibilities. Today, that spirit lives in our national defense strategy, not just in might, but in readiness. Native Land Rights and Resource Management, Executive Order 2300 and Executive Order 2493. One of the most significant orders was Executive Order 2300, which reserved additional lands for the Papago Indians, now known as the Tohono O'odham Nation in Arizona. Later that year, Wilson signed EO 2493, extending trust periods on allotments for the absentee Shawnee and citizen Potawatomi in Oklahoma. These weren't perfect fixes, but they were acknowledgments. They said, native land matters, sovereignty matters. We're still working to fulfill that promise today. Infrastructure and everyday life, EO 2479. Even small things mattered. EO 2479 allowed interest to be paid on deposit money orders in the canal zone. That sounds minor, but it was a big deal to the workers sending money home to their families. That's what governance is, solving the little things that make big lives more livable. In closing, when we talk about executive orders, it's easy to think of them as paperwork, but every one of these was a decision, a vision, a legacy. Wilson's 1916 orders gave us a stronger army, a safer border, a clearer identity, a more inclusive workforce, and a more preserved America. And today, whether we're issuing passports, appointing federal workers, raising our flag, or hiking our public lands, we're still living in the house that Wilson helped frame. So let us learn from history, let us govern with purpose, and let us always remember the little things matter, the people matter, and the pen used wisely can build a better nation for all. God bless you, God bless our history, and may we carry its lessons forward.
As President of the United States in the year of our Lord 1917, I did issue the following executive orders and proclamations, each serving a vital purpose for the safety, dignity, and future of this republic. Proclamation 1364, declaring that a state of war exists between the United States and Germany, April 6, 1917. Proclamation 1370, designating June 1, 1917 as Registration Day, May 18, 1917. Proclamation 1371, declaring rules for maintenance of neutrality of the Panama Canal and Canal Zone, May 23, 1917. Executive Order 2503, Dolly Farrier, exemption from civil service rules on appointment, January 3, 1917. Executive Order 2504, unascertained abolished as a port of entry in Customs District Number 38, January 3, 1917. Executive Order 2505, extending trust or other period of restriction on Indian land patents, January 3, 1917. Executive Order 2507, diminishment of Sierra National Forest, California, and opening for settlement, January 3, 1917. Executive Order 2508, establishment of Norton Bay Reservation, Alaska, January 3, 1917. Executive Order 2509, Frank Kearney made eligible for promotion without regard to civil service rules, January 5, 1917. Executive Order 2510, diminishment of petroleum reserves, NOSER, 15 and 30, California, January 9, 1917. Executive Order 2511, withdrawing lands in New Mexico for possible inclusion in Gran Quivira National Reserve, January 11, 1917. Executive Order 2512, extending trust periods on allotments in Oklahoma, January 15, 1917. Executive Order 2514, relating to conditions of employment in the Panama Canal Service, January 15, 1917. Executive Order 2515, creating an interdepartmental board on location of nitrate plants, January 15, 1917. 1917 Executive Order 2516, ordering mourning formalities for death of Admiral George Dewey, January 17, 1917. Executive Order 2517, reserving lands in New Mexico for military purposes, January 18, 1917.
My fellow Americans, let's talk about the year 1917. That was the year the United States formally entered the First World War, a war we tried to stay out of, but a war that tested our soul and shaped our century. Woodrow Wilson, our 28th president, was a man of both conviction and caution, and in 1917, the decisions he made through executive action still affect us in ways we may not always see, but we certainly feel. First, let's talk about Executive Order 2594, establishing the Committee on Public Information, CPI. This wasn't just a committee, it was America's first formal effort to control our own narrative on the world stage. It produced films, posters, speeches, and more, designed to unify our people and explain why we were going to war. Today, we live in a time of disinformation, deep fakes, and social media manipulation. The CPI reminds us the government's responsibility to communicate clearly with the American people isn't new. It began here. That first wartime information machine paved the way for how governments communicate in times of crisis. Then came Executive Orders 2692 and 2692A, designating defensive sea areas for the Panama Canal and Honolulu. This may sound like a technical military detail, but it was about safeguarding the arteries of American power and commerce. These were the first steps in modern homeland defense strategy. They were acts of foresight. That same Panama Canal still plays a strategic role in global shipping. Those zones, those coordinates, still matter to our Navy. Now take Executive Order 2762, restricting the transfer of federal employees during the war effort. Imagine a country trying to ramp up for war. Factories converting, scientists needed, clerks, engineers, logistics officers reassigned strategically. Wilson said, "You can't just move people around freely when the nation is mobilizing." It was a recognition that human capital is national strength. Today, we still use variants of this principle when we respond to national emergencies. COVID-19, wildfires, hurricanes, we lean on continuity and surge response policies rooted in decisions like this. There's Executive Order 2765, determining what constituted fair profit under the Food Control Act. This was bold. The government saying, we won't let wartime profiteering destroy our people's trust. It was about food prices, coal, sugar, essentials. It was about fairness when fear can be exploited. You see echoes of this every time we pass price gouging laws during a hurricane, when we cap insulin costs, when we ask oil companies not to raise prices during war. Wilson drew the first lines on that battlefield, the battlefield of economic morality. Let's not forget Executive Order 2744, fixing the salary and authority of the alien property custodian. It meant that any property belonging to enemy nations or their business entities was to be seized and managed on behalf of the U.S. government. It raised questions of liberty and justice. How do we treat our enemies' assets? Do we do so with fairness? Do we respect due process? These questions still guide our sanctions policies today. And there's one that may sound small but carried deep dignity. Executive Order 2766, temporarily appointing rural mail carriers without exam. When your country is in crisis but the mail still needs to get through, this was Wilson saying, we'll keep serving the people even while we serve the war. Mail, still a lifeline, then and now. During COVID, during floods, during war, and then, of course, there were land designations from reserving more rock in California for lighthouse service, to protecting Alaska lands for native education, to reconfiguring military reservations in Hawaii and Texas. These weren't just administrative land swaps, they were building the infrastructure of a nation on the rise. Wilson was crafting the blueprint of modern America: secure borders, educated populations, protected resources. So what does this all mean today? 1917 wasn't just about war. It was about how to stay a democracy while fighting one. It was about controlling narratives without becoming propaganda, using power without becoming a tyrant, moving fast without losing fairness, mobilizing the whole government without forgetting the people it serves. These executive orders weren't mere memos. They were the stitching in the fabric of wartime governance, and many of them still hold. Today, when we manage cyber warfare, regulate pharmaceuticals, fight inflation, or deploy the National Guard, we're not starting from scratch. We are building on a century-old architecture, one that Wilson, for better or worse, began sketching in ink and urgency. History doesn't just live in textbooks, it lives in the codes we follow, the forms we file, the policies we inherit. That's why we do this, that's why we watch. This is Executive Order Watch. I'm President Joe Biden, and together we remember to remember.
In the year of our Lord 1918, as the Great War raged on and the demands of our republic grew more complex, it became necessary to issue a number of executive orders and proclamations, each crafted to serve the nation's security, welfare, and legal integrity. Allow me to recount them, not merely as bureaucratic instruments, but as threads in the great fabric of our wartime governance. Executive Orders. On January 3, 1918, I amended the Executive Order of August 11, 1916, to clarify the rations provided to enlisted men of the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps who were under treatment or duty at the General Hospital in Hot Springs, Arkansas. 4 days later, on January 7th, I revised the Civil Service rules by striking out a paragraph relating to shipping commissioners in the Commerce Department. January 8th saw the authorization of Charles W. Olvey's transfer from skilled laborer to a clerical role in the Secretary of Commerce's office. On January 9th, I ordered that certain persons previously transferred to the War Department be returned to their posts within the Coast and Geodetic Survey. January 10th witnessed two orders. The first rescinded an examination exception for certain Revenue Cutter Service roles, and the second temporarily accepted Quartermaster Corps personnel from examination due to their involvement in war construction. However, 5 days later, on January 15th, I revoked that latter exemption concerning the Quartermaster Corps. On the same day, I granted the Secretary of the Treasury special authority, allowing him to appoint individuals to posts in the Bureau of Engraving and Printing without civil service approval due to wartime necessity. January 19th, I established a military reservation for the National Guard. 3 days hence, January 22nd, I allotted funding under the Trading with the Enemy Act. On January 26th, I issued rules under Section 5 of that same act, supplementing prior Espionage Act regulations. February 5th marked the amendment of a previous executive order dated October 12, 1917. On February 26th, I prescribed further rules concerning the powers of the alien property custodian. March 9th brought an inclusion of federal employees residing in Laurel, Maryland under Executive Order Number 1572. March 25th, I reserved lands in Panama, granted to us under the 1904 Treaty for military purposes. 3 days later, on March 28th, I authorized the seizure of equipment aboard Netherlands vessels docked in American harbors. April 2nd, I established procedures for the sale of seized enemy property by the alien property custodian. On April 11th, I revoked certain delegated authorities under the Trading with the Enemy Act. April 24th was marked by a series of orders, 5 in total, all authorizing additional property sales by the custodian under the aforementioned Act. May 7th and 9th continued that trend with 2 further sales authorized. May 11th, I formally recognized the National Research Council of the National Academy of Sciences and ordered the Shipping Board to seize the Austro-Hungarian vessel Martha Washington. On May 14th, I authorized the eligibility of Joseph H. Mills for promotion. May 16th saw the transfer of vessels Explorer and Batterson to the Navy Department. May 20th, I established the Bureau of Aircraft Production to expedite our aerial capabilities. May 28th, I withdrew certain public lands in the Panama Canal Zone for military use. May 31st, I ordered that most law officers of the federal government act under the Justice Department's supervision. June 13th, I granted leave for Spanish War veterans to attend their reunion. June 15th, I issued an order concerning the Ornstein-Koppel Company, a German firm with American-held assets. On June 18th, I delegated War Housing Authority to the Secretary of Labor. June 21st allowed veterans of the Grand Army of the Republic leave to attend their own gathering. On July 1st and 2nd, I ordered the withdrawal of public lands in Hawaii and directed all federal health activities to fall under the Public Health Service. July 3rd, I reassigned portions of the coal section to the Fuel Administration. On July 9th, I reaffirmed the governor of the Panama Canal Zone's authority under the Espionage Act. July 15th, I again permitted the alien property custodian to conduct property sales. On July 16th, I refined the rules for the custodian's duties, and on the 18th, I allowed extended work days for war housing efforts and reinstatement eligibility for civil service veterans. July 26th brought an amendment to Panama Canal navigation rules, and July 31st, I authorized standardization of petroleum specs via the Fuel Administration. August 8th, I issued rules governing who may enter or leave the United States. August 20th and 29th, I issued additional regulations and sale authorizations under the Trading with the Enemy Act. In September, I authorized multiple private sales and cancellations of previous sales under that same act, aiming to protect the interests of the United States in economic warfare. September 30th, I rejected a $145,000 bid for property held under the Act. October 9th, I provided for the licensing of chauffeurs in the Canal Zone. November 4th, I designated land and water for use as a naval air station. November 12th, I again reinforced the responsibilities of the alien property custodian. On November 14th and 16th, I granted sick leave to alien employees and amended civil service rules for Panama. November 26th, I exempted loyal persons from classification as enemy aliens, allowing them to pursue naturalization. November 27th, I issued 3 proclamations diminishing or modifying national forest areas across Utah, Colorado, Montana, and Oregon. On November 29th, I restored employment eligibility to those separated from government service due to force reduction. December 3rd, I vested further powers under the Trading with the Enemy Act to the custodian and authorized rejection of all bids for certain foreign-owned stocks. Proclamations. On January 15th, I set apart the Alabama National Forest as a federal reserve. August 31st, I designated September 12th as registration day for all men aged 18 to 45. September 2nd, I determined the price of wheat for 1919. On September 6th, I announced the licensing of stockyards and product dealers. September 16th, I prohibited using foodstuffs to produce malt liquors and announced fuel oil trading regulations. September 18th, I designated the registration period for Alaskan residents between October 15th and December 16th. On September 19th, I appointed Saturday, October 1st, as Liberty Day. September 24th, I set aside Katmai National Monument in Alaska for preservation. October 10th, I designated October 26th as registration day in both Hawaii and Puerto Rico. October 25th, I released further regulations to protect migratory birds. November 2nd, I took possession of lands in Virginia for a Navy mine depot and seized marine cable systems vital to communications. November 4th, I claimed additional lands for naval ordnance purposes. November 7th, I called the Virginia Coast Artillery into active military service. November 16th, I declared Thanksgiving Day to be Thursday, November 28th, and took control of the American Railway Express Company. November 18th, I called part of the Philippine Guard into U.S. military service. November 27th, I issued proclamations reducing the area of several national forests across Arkansas and Montana. November 29th, I restricted more individuals from trading with enemy nations. December 2nd, I ordered the seizure of land at Cape May, New Jersey for a naval air station. December 3rd, I determined compensation for seized German dock properties in Hoboken, New Jersey. On December 16th and 23rd, I revoked wartime prohibitions against aircraft expositions and rescinded specified regulations concerning alien enemies. In this most trying of years, each action, each proclamation was but a measure of our national determination. They were strokes of the pen meant not to bind the people, but to safeguard their liberties. Let the record of 1918 stand as evidence of a government under strain, yet committed to justice and to the preservation of the Republic. Time for another break. See you after the rack.
Folks, let me take you back to a year that shaped the world and still echoes through the policies we live with today. The year was 1918. America was at war. The world was on fire. And President Woodrow Wilson, he was steering this nation through unprecedented global conflict. Now look, you talk about executive power. Wilson had to use it, not for show, for survival. He created the Bureau of Aircraft Production on May 20th, because in modern warfare, whoever owns the skies has the edge. That's the same innovation pipeline that helped build our Air Force and drive our aerospace industry today. Then on July 1st, he ordered that all federal public health activities fall under the Public Health Service. You better believe that's the foundation of how we fight pandemics today, including COVID-19.
As President of these United States, I took careful action in 1919 to guide our nation through the uneasy dawn of peace. Each order and proclamation bore the weight of national duty. Permit me to recount them to you now. On January 1st, I confirmed an erroneously allowed entry in the former Fort Peck Indian Reservation in Montana, in accordance with a prior proclamation of 1917. January 7th, I canceled the licenses of designated food products no longer essential under wartime authority. That same day, I issued a solemn proclamation announcing the death of former President Theodore Roosevelt. January 10th, I appointed Walker D. Hines as Director General of Railroads, a necessary continuation as federal control wound down. On January 11th, I authorized the alien property custodian to transfer ownership of the Susquehanna silk mills to an American citizen, property formerly held by German nationals. By January 25th, I had issued multiple orders. I took possession of additional lands in Maryland for Army ordnance purposes, diminished the area of the Nevada National Forest, announced that several previously essential products no longer required licenses, and revoked executive orders establishing defensive sea areas as war measures drew to a close. That day also included my retransfer of personnel from the War Department back to the Coast and Geodetic Survey, and my revocation of a prior order concerning submarine cables and telegraph and telephone lines. Still, on January 25th, I authorized leave due to Canal Zone employees returning from military service and revoked the 1917 order that placed control of the Panama Canal under Army command, a symbolic return to normal governance. January 30th, I permitted the use of grain for non-intoxicating beverages, balancing economic freedoms with the temperance movement. February 5th, I issued an executive order affecting land management in Alaska. On February 7th, I amended the civil service rules regarding reinstatement, ensuring war veterans and former employees had a fair path back to service. February 11th, I announced that a number of specified necessities would no longer require licensing, easing post-war economic controls. On February 24th, I appointed Herbert Hoover as Director General of the American Relief Administration to assist Europe's recovery. On February 25th, I issued multiple orders. I reserved portions of the Guano Islands in the Caribbean Sea for lighthouse use, diminished the Helena National Forest in Montana, and restored certain vessels and personnel to pre-war functions. February 26th, I acted again. I exempted Clara Bell's suit from civil service rules, authorized an industrial board within the Commerce Department to bypass civil service hiring procedures, allowed the alien property custodian to sell trademarks and patents of enemy firms to the Chemical Foundation, Inc., and diminished the Cabinet National Forest in Montana, reserving excluded lands for townsite purposes. That same day, I also issued the return of specific vessels and personnel, reinforcing peacetime demobilization. February 27th, I issued multiple orders exempting individuals, including Miss Bert M. Williams, from civil service rules for appointments. On February 28th, I revoked the liquor control zones in Pennsylvania and Tennessee and issued a temporary withdrawal of lands in Montana, pending congressional legislation. As we moved into the spring and summer of 1919, our republic faced decisions not only of recovery, but of redirection, how to reorganize our internal systems, manage former enemy property, and shape our public lands for future generations. And so I issued the following orders and proclamations. On March 2nd, I rescinded the wartime order requiring departmental approval for civil service examinations, restoring peacetime merit processes. The next day, March 3rd, I extended the withdrawal of certain lands in Idaho under prior proclamation, pending new legislation. I also authorized the return of land to the government of the Philippines and appointed Charles Arthur Richards to represent the Food Administrator on the War Trade Board. That same day, I ordered the transfer of all War Trade Board functions and records to the State Department and prescribed regulations for the sale of lots within Girdwood Townsite, Alaska. On March 4th, I authorized the alien property custodian to reject all bids for the Golda Patent Manufacturing Company and separately for the New Brunswick Chemical Company. That day, I also established the Laguna Mountain Administrative Site in California as a ranger station within the Cleveland National Forest, and I amended the form of Panama Canal tonnage certificates, updating our global maritime documentation. March 12th and 13th, I restructured responsibilities over the Emergency Shipping Fund, transferring powers from the Shipping Board to the War Secretary and later to another federal entity. Between March 13th and March 15th, I issued additional orders. I rejected all bids for the Gerhardt and Hay Company, for the Hayden Chemical Works, and for the International Textile Company. These properties had belonged to enemy aliens and were protected from ill-advised sale. March 15th, I amended regulations governing diplomatic appointments and promotions, and then, on March 19th, I abolished the Aircraft Board. Its work done, its mission complete. March 24th, I transferred all property and patent rights of enemy nationals Rudolf Goldschmidt and the Hochfrequenz Maschinen Company to the American Radio Company, and likewise approved the private sale of German superheater patents to the Locomotive Superheater Company, technology for peace, not war. On March 25th, I revoked Executive Order 2978, restoring lands near Fort DeRussy, Oahu, and granted civil service reinstatement for one individual previously serving the government. Moving into April, I continued oversight of enemy property. On April 5th, I authorized the custodian to sell certain patents and trademarks to the Chemical Foundation, and to reject all bids for shares of K&E Newmont, Inc. and the Dr. Yeager's Sanitary Woolen System Company. April 8th, I restored lands in Hawaii previously reserved for military purposes to the territory of Hawaii. Then, on April 16th, I issued two important civil service revisions. I amended the qualification rules for applicants and revoked prior orders from July 18, 1918 and February 7, 1919 regarding reinstatement, simplifying entry back into government work. May 4th, I issued further internal orders to that end, and on May 7th, I acted again regarding alien property. May 24th, I authorized the Secretary of the Navy to transfer certain naval vessels to other executive departments, repurposing them for non-military functions in peacetime. On May 31st, I authorized the reinstatement of Frank H. Wang as a postal clerk at the Panama Canal. Into June, I revised maritime law. On June 17th, I amended the consular regulations of 1896 concerning wage payments at foreign ports, ensuring fairness and compliance in overseas labor. As the year drew to a close, our republic found itself recalibrating, transitioning out of war footing and into peacetime governance, and so I pressed forward with the work of reorganization, restoration, and regulation. On July 15th, I vested in the Attorney General all powers conferred upon the President under Section 9 of the Trading with the Enemy Act, strengthening legal authority for managing enemy property and commerce. On July 22nd, I transferred the records of the War Industries Board to the Council of National Defense, consolidating oversight in the post-war economy. Then, on July 25th, I set aside land in the Canal Zone for military use, officially designating areas as Fort Amador and Fort Grant military reservations. On August 8th, I suspended the legal requirement for inspections of foreign-built ships for a period of 18 months, allowing smoother global trade transitions. On August 21st, I dissolved the Committee on Public Information and transferred its assets to the Council of National Defense. With war propaganda no longer needed, transparency and public unity were left in the care of peacetime institutions. On August 27th, I issued a directive to the General Supply Committee of the Treasury, ordering it to maintain records of surplus government materials, ensuring proper use across agencies. On October 30th, I annulled remaining orders of the Fuel Administration, restoring standard bituminous coal regulations to prevent economic distortion. November 24th, I authorized the United States to take legal title of all German vessels seized during the war, pursuant to joint resolution securing property tied to our victory. November 25th, I amended a 1914 executive order regarding employment conditions for the Panama Canal Permanent Force, ensuring protections and fairness for those laboring abroad. As December began, I addressed public land use. On December 2nd, I withdrew land in Oregon for classification, connected to prior Executive Order 2593, and I restored lands previously reserved for Columbia River improvements and others reserved in Hawaii back to the territorial government. December 22nd, I set aside land in the Canal Zone for the establishment of Quarry Heights and Fort William D. Davie military reservations, fortifying our Western Hemisphere defenses. Finally, on December 30th, I designated additional land in the Canal Zone for military reservation, marking the close of a year that witnessed our redefinition as a global power and our readiness to secure that legacy. These were not mere orders, they were mile markers on the road between war and peace. Some restored what war had displaced, others laid the groundwork for the decades to come. May those who study them understand that a president's pen in times of transition is not an instrument of power, but a steward's hand, shaping the destiny of the nation for the common good. Let's take a break. See you after this wreck.
1919 was more than just the year after the Great War ended. It was the year America had to make a choice. Do we go back to the way things were, or do we move forward into something new? And under President Woodrow Wilson, we moved. That year, Wilson's pen didn't slow down. He signed over 90 executive orders and proclamations. Each one, some sweeping, some subtle, helped reshape the country after the fire of global war. Early on, he announced the death of President Theodore Roosevelt. A nation mourned a Rough Rider as it tried to find its footing again. He relinquished federal control of the railroads and the American Railway Express Company, giving the economy back to the people. He appointed Herbert Hoover to lead the American Relief Administration, feeding millions across Europe. He kept an eye on the environment, too, modifying forests, expanding national monuments, and restoring lands to the states and territories. He banned the export of wheat, then lifted restrictions when stability returned. He took possession of seized German vessels and vested power in the Attorney General to manage wartime property. And as the year came to a close, he restructured the Canal Zone, setting up military reservations like Quarry Heights and Fort Grant, knowing the world was still watching. Look, 1919 taught us that peace takes as much work as war. And President Wilson, he worked. He led a country through uncertainty, not by standing still, but by signing, deciding, moving. And now, with deep respect, I pass the mic back to the man who walked us through it himself, President Woodrow Wilson.
As the final year of my presidency began, America stood at the edge of transition once more, from wartime unity to peacetime responsibility. The pen remained my instrument of duty, shaping the course of government, policy, and principle. Allow me to reflect on the work we undertook together in 1920. On January 7th, I established regulations for the Canal Zone, allowing for the sale, possession, and use of liquors, but strictly for sacramental, scientific, industrial, pharmaceutical, and medicinal purposes. January 8th, I required all executive departments to furnish information to the Bituminous Coal Commission, ensuring transparency in one of the nation's most vital resources. January 9th, I issued regulations concerning court costs and securities in the district and magistrates courts of the Panama Canal Zone. January 16th, I set apart the Boone National Forest in North Carolina, preserving a vital region of our southern Appalachians. January 29th, I established the Nantahala National Forest, spanning parts of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, a gift to the South and to future generations. February 3rd, I applied Executive Order Number 3091 to the Panama Canal, extending governance and structure to that vital corridor of commerce. February 11th, I authorized charges for services rendered by the Quarantine Division of the Canal. February 12th, I issued a proclamation designating the agency responsible for railroad reimbursements during federal control. February 17th, I transferred specific property to the territory of Hawaii, furthering our responsibility to our island territories. February 20th, I established a maximum rate of pay for alien employees of the Panama Canal and the Panama Railroad Company, ensuring fair regulation without exploitation. February 27th, I extended copyright protections to Sweden, specifically for mechanical musical reproductions, aligning international law with American innovation. February 28th, I designated the Director General of Railroads as the official agent to terminate federal control over transportation systems. On March 1st, I reserved land near the Punta Mala Lighthouse for use as a naval radio station. March 6th, I addressed public safety in the Isthmus by regulating the carrying and keeping of arms in the Canal Zone. March 11th, I designated the Director General as agent in legal actions arising from federal control of transportation. March 19th, I restored the rules and regulations of the Fuel Administration to ensure responsible distribution. March 24th, I issued the order dissolving the United States Bituminous Coal Commission, a wartime measure no longer needed in peace. March 31st, I signed an executive order establishing maritime quarantine regulations for the Canal Zone and the harbors of Panama and Colon. April 9th, I reserved lands for Fort Randolph, Francefield, and the Coco Solo Naval Reservation, solidifying our defenses at the gateway of the Americas. April 10th, I extended copyright protection to Great Britain, retroactively including works published there since August 1st, 1914. April 28th, I set apart the Monongahela National Forest, spanning Virginia and West Virginia, preserving one of our richest Appalachian ecosystems. With spring came new responsibilities of conservation, justice, and transition. The executive office remained diligent in its service to the American people. On May 5th, I issued two significant directives. First, I transferred the records of the War Labor Board to the Council of National Defense, consolidating wartime labor archives. Second, I signed a proclamation extending the time for payment of land installments by members of the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana, showing fairness and flexibility toward Native obligations. On May 14th, I appointed John Barton Payne as Director General of Railroads, and in the same breath, I designated him as legal agent for matters stemming from federal transportation control, ensuring a smooth handoff from wartime coordination to civilian order. May 25th, I declared that licenses for dealers in certain cereals were no longer essential, signaling further economic normalization. On June 2nd, I signed regulations regarding the reinstatement of former federal employees nearing retirement age, providing dignity and access to those who had served. June 3rd, I appointed the Anthracite Coal Mining Commission, and on June 12th, I authorized coal mining in the Matanuska Field of Alaska for naval purposes, fueling the fleet with American energy. June 14th, I set apart the Cherokee National Forest, spanning Georgia and Tennessee, preserving forest land rooted in deep historical soil. On June 16th, I suspended a provision of my March 24th executive order concerning coal regulation until the Anthracite Coal Commission completed its work. June 30th, I temporarily withdrew land in South Dakota to evaluate its suitability for permanent reservation. July 9th, I issued additional protections for migratory birds, reinforcing the original spirit of environmental preservation. July 12th, I proclaimed the formal opening of the Panama Canal, a monumental achievement for American engineering and global trade. July 14th, I withdrew more land in South Dakota to protect the water supply of Wind Cave National Park. July 21st, I amended the consular regulations concerning the payment of wages, ensuring fairness for those employed overseas. July 24th, I set apart the Unica National Forest, stretching across North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, yet another addition to our green legacy. July 26th, I withdrew land in Arizona to determine whether it should be included in the Tumacacori National Monument, honoring sacred cultural history. August 4th, I issued a proclamation recommending the national observance of the tercentenary of the landing of the Pilgrims, calling the nation to reflect on our foundations. August 7th, I signed the executive order establishing the Holy Cross Cypress National Forest in Colorado, preserving vital western landscapes. On September 1st, I designated Paitilla Point in the Canal Zone as a military reservation, ensuring our strategic footing in the hemisphere. September 7th, I proclaimed October 9th as Fire Prevention Day, urging national awareness and responsibility to safeguard our homes and forests. As 1920 drew to a close, my administration remained committed to protection, conservation, and restoring balance in a rapidly changing post-war world. On October 1st, I issued 2 proclamations. I diminished the area of the Trinity National Forest in California, and at the same time, I enlarged the Modoc National Forest, ensuring federal land better aligned with ecological needs. October 9th, I set aside the Custer State Park Game Sanctuary in South Dakota, preserving both wildlife and heritage. October 19th, I extended the area of the Arkansas National Forest. And on October 30th, I modified the Santa Fe National Forest in New Mexico and announced that licenses for sugar dealers and related commodities were no longer essential. October 30th also marked a more localized concern. I authorized the licensing of chauffeurs in the Canal Zone, contributing to transportation regulation and public safety. On November 6th, I signed an order to expand the Fort Sherman Military Reservation in the Canal Zone, reinforcing our presence in the region. November 12th, I designated Thursday, November 25th, 1920, as a National Day of Thanksgiving, calling Americans to reflect in gratitude. On November 24th, I issued an executive order relating to the marginal wharf area connected to the Sand Island Military Reservation in Hawaii. November 28th, I prescribed the design and dimensions of an official flag for the Secretary of State, a symbol of diplomacy and national presence abroad. On November 30th, I granted Constance Kirshner an exemption from civil service rules and extended the trust period on land allotments to the Indians of the Crow Creek Reservation in South Dakota. December 1st, I extended that same trust period for the Ponca Indians of Oklahoma and issued an order for the diminishment of certain military reservations, restoring balance between defense and development. On December 7th, I extended the period of restriction against alienation for any Indian-issued land patents on public domain lands. December 8th, I diminished the Alaska town site and railroad withdrawal number. 2. Reopening certain lands to entry and settlement. December 9th, I signed 2 proclamations. One granting copyright protections to Denmark and another enlarging the Caribou National Forest across Idaho and Wyoming. December 10th, I prescribed new Army regulations governing the maximum limits of punishment, reinforcing military justice with fairness and order. December 11th, I granted Natalie Summers an exemption from civil service rules on appointment. December 24th, I amended Civil Service Rules Schedule A, Subdivision 3, Paragraph 7, and granted Ernest D. Pickle a similar exemption. December 26th, I signed that exemption formally. And finally, on December 31st, I issued 2 final executive orders. First, I transferred land from the Chelan National Forest to the Wenatchee National Forest in Washington, and then I modified the boundaries of both forests to reflect that change. In that final year of my presidency, I sought not grandeur, but grounding. Each action, each proclamation was a step toward healing, preservation, and transition. Though my time in office closed with that calendar year, I left behind not just policy, but a vision that governance must always serve the people, protect the land, and prepare the republic for tomorrow. Back after this break, time to rack 'em.
1920, 100 years ago, this country was coming out of war. A pandemic had reshaped everyday life, and the foundations of the modern American government were being laid by President Woodrow Wilson, one order, one proclamation at a time. That year, Wilson signed orders that may not seem loud in our headlines today, but they set the stage for the way we govern, the way we preserve, and the way we transition. Let's talk about the Canal Zone, a major focus for Wilson. He established rules for the sale of liquors for medicinal and sacramental use on January 7th. That might sound small, but remember, Prohibition had just begun. America was redefining the balance between freedom and law, and even in distant territories like Panama, Wilson was setting the tone. On July 12th, he made history by formally declaring the Panama Canal open. Think about that. A century later, it remains one of the most critical arteries of world trade. He didn't build it, but he gave it a formal birth as a global gateway. Wilson also issued powerful land proclamations. He set aside or expanded national forests like Boone, Nantahala, Monongahela, Cherokee, Unaka, and Caribou. He wasn't just planting trees, he was planting legacy. These forests, still standing today, help combat climate change, provide clean water, and protect wildlife. Wilson didn't call it environmentalism, but that's exactly what it was. He created the Custer State Park Game Sanctuary in South Dakota and expanded military reservations like Fort Sherman, Coco Solo, and Paitila Point in the Canal Zone, balancing defense and conservation. On November 12th, he proclaimed Thanksgiving Day. Now, that's a tradition that stretches far before him. But what makes Wilson's proclamation matter is that he issued it in a time of unrest, hardship, and healing, just like we've done in our own times. Gratitude, even in difficulty, is how America breathes. And let's not forget the trust protections he extended for Native American lands, for the Crow Creek, the Ponca, and across the public domain. In his time, those were controversial, but now we see them for what they were, acts of recognition and preservation of rights. Wilson's actions also spoke to international cooperation. He extended copyright protections to Sweden, Great Britain, and Denmark, setting a legal precedent for the global sharing of ideas and intellectual property. Today, our digital age depends on that very framework. And then there were the details: wage fairness for consular workers, railroad legal settlements, coal mining in Alaska for naval supply, reinstatement rights for aging federal employees, even the flag design for the Secretary of State's office. That's the machinery of democracy at work. So what does 1920 mean to us now? It means transition is hard work. It means peace requires as much planning as war. And it means that the decisions we make, sometimes quiet, sometimes technical, shape the land, the law, and the legacy that future generations inherit. Wilson closed his presidency with a pen in hand and the people on his mind. And with that, I pass the mic back to the man who signed those orders with vision and responsibility, President Woodrow Wilson.
As the final chapter of my presidency opened, I remained steadfast in my responsibility to shape the nation through lawful action, clearing the desk not in haste but in fidelity to duty. Though my health had waned, the work of governance did not. These were the last directives of my pen, and I share them now. On January 4th, I signed an executive order abolishing the Vancouver Land District in Washington and transferred all lands, business, and archives to the Olympia Land District, a measure of efficiency in federal land management. January 5th, I amended an earlier order from 1914, expanding its scope to include mints, assay offices, and Federal Reserve banks, aligning their duties with those of the now abolished assistant treasurers as permitted under the Act of May 29, 1920. January 7th, I extended the trust period on allotments made to the Indians of the Sicuan Mission reservations in California, preserving their land rights and providing a buffer against displacement. On January 12th, I restored certain lands in Alaska, previously withdrawn for agricultural experiment stations, to the public domain, releasing them back to the American people. January 22nd, I authorized the withdrawal of public lands in Phoenix, Arizona, for municipal purposes, ensuring responsible urban development in the growing West. January 24th, I issued two orders, one prescribing the transfer of certain federal records to the Public Health Service, and the other abolishing Portland, Oregon as a port of entry, redefining its customs boundaries to improve administration in Collection District number 29th of January 28th. I granted Emma V. Morgan an exemption from civil service rules, allowing her appointment to proceed in recognition of merit and service. On that same day, I signed two land-related withdrawals, one in Wyoming and another in California, each for classification and pending legislation concerning their disposition. February 2nd, I amended the Civil Service Rules, Schedule A, Subdivision 3, Paragraph 9, and separately, I granted an individual exemption from civil service appointment restrictions in accordance with specific departmental needs. February 3rd, I amended Schedule A again, this time Paragraph 7, addressing appointment classifications. And that same day, I issued a proclamation convening a special session of the United States Senate. On February 10th, I granted Arthur Byrd an exemption from civil service rules as his appointment served the public interest. February 11th, I withdrew land in New Mexico for public purposes. February 12th, I signed three important executive orders. One excusing federal per diem employees and day laborers in Washington, D.C. from duty on March 4th, the day of the presidential inauguration. Another withdrawing land in Alaska for use in the Warm Springs Bay Lighthouse Reserve. And a third, reserving land in Arizona for use as a sheep administrative site for the Prescott National Forest. Though my presidency neared its close, the duty to guide, to protect, and to organize remained mine until the very final hour, and so I continued the work, ensuring the transition of power did not interrupt the forward motion of the Republic. On February 16th, I signed an executive order authorizing the creation of the Housing Corporation of Pennsylvania through the Secretary of Labor, a step toward addressing post-war housing shortages and the growing demands of industry. February 18th, I granted civil service exemptions to Margaret Reardon and Joseph F. Murphy, facilitating their appointments to serve the people without delay. February 22nd, I signed 2 key land orders, one in Wyoming, reserving lands previously withdrawn for power site purposes for classification and potential inclusion in the Shoshone National Forest. The other in Idaho, withdrawing land for similar classification under possible addition to the Minidoka National Forest. On February 27th, I ordered the diminishment of the Shasta National Forest in California and allowed those lands to be open to entry, but only to specific individuals, reflecting a balance between public access and forest management. March 1st, I issued an order excluding certain employees of the Reclamation Service from the Civil Service Retirement Act, tailoring administrative provisions to suit the unique structure of that bureau. Then on March 3rd, just one day before my term ended, I issued 2 final acts of national solemnity and symbolism. I ordered flags flown at half-mast in Washington, D.C. on March 5th and in Bowling Green, Missouri on March 7th in honor of Champ Clark, former Speaker of the House, a statesman of distinction and debate. That same day, I issued 3 final proclamations, one modifying the area of the Gila National Forest in New Mexico, another modifying the area of the Dattel National Forest, and lastly, I prescribed additional protections for migratory game birds, continuing the conservation legacy I began years before. And now I recount the final acts of my administration, each one a quiet instrument of public service. Though I knew my days in office were drawing to a close, I held firm to the belief that governance continues until the very last moment entrusted to it. On February 14th, I signed a proclamation transferring lands to Puerto Rico for the development of highways, a commitment to modern infrastructure and our island territories. On March 3rd, I closed my executive work as I had begun it years before, with care for the land and the people. I modified the boundaries of both the Gila and Dattel National Forests in New Mexico, adjusting our stewardship of the American landscape, and finally, I prescribed further regulations to protect migratory game birds, reinforcing a vision of conservation that would long outlive my administration. These were the last of my signatures as President of the United States. Each one, no matter how small, was an act of continuity, ensuring the institutions of this republic endured beyond any single man or term. I leave these pages of history not with fanfare, but with faith. Faith in the Constitution, in the people, and in the progress yet to come. Never finish this game. You keep fighting the good fight. For democracy I live for democracy I die for.
By the time 1921 arrived, President Woodrow Wilson had been through it all. War, a pandemic, international negotiations, domestic division, and personal health battles. But even in those final weeks, he didn't stop. He governed until the very last day. In those early days of 1921, Wilson was still shaping the nation. On January 4th, he reorganized land management in the West, abolishing the Vancouver Land District and consolidating resources in Washington State. On January 5th, he adjusted financial oversight, bringing Federal Reserve banks and U.S. mints in line with modern Treasury responsibilities. He extended trust periods for native land allotments, restored agricultural lands in Alaska, and reserved others in Arizona, California, and Wyoming for future planning. On February 3rd, he called a special session of the Senate, and by March 3rd, on his final full day in office, he was still signing, modifying national forests and protecting migratory birds. Even the symbolic mattered. Wilson ordered half-mast flags for former Speaker Champ Clark. That wasn't just respect, it was legacy, it was unity. But let's not just look at 1921. Let's look at the full arc of what Wilson gave us. Biden on Wilson's legacy. He led us through World War I, and whether you agree with every step or not, he was committed to peace. He dreamed of a League of Nations, a vision that would eventually become the United Nations. He formed the Federal Reserve, changing forever how we manage our economy. He regulated big business, passed child labor laws, and lowered tariffs because he believed in an economy that worked for everyone, not just the few. He signed proclamations protecting Native American land, expanded the national forest system, and created dozens of new monuments and preserves. That wasn't political, it was patriotic. He was preserving the land we all share. In the Canal Zone, he brought order and structure, ensuring that America's most important engineering marvel would be governed responsibly. And let's not forget, he proclaimed Thanksgiving, respected the rights of federal workers, and yes, he made policy for for liquor during Prohibition while still upholding religious and medical freedoms. The man was flawed, like all of us. He carried burdens and made decisions that history continues to debate. But what can't be denied is this: Wilson believed in the American experiment, and through war, disease, dissent, and disappointment, he kept writing, kept signing, kept working. Woodrow Wilson didn't just leave office. He left a trail of policy, of preservation, of purpose. And now, a century later, we still walk the road he paved. With that, I pass the voice back to the man who signed his last order with a trembling hand, but a steady will, President Woodrow Wilson.
Glad we were able to check in on Biden, still stuck in the past, bless his heart. But that's all right. We're on a mission, and every chapter counts. As we work our way toward the present day, let's enjoy the journey. These past presidents got stories to tell, lessons, warnings, and sometimes even a little inspiration. So stay locked in, stay sharp, and as always, we look forward to hearing more voices echo through time. Until next time, keep your mind open and your history close. For democracy we live for democracy we die for. All right, y'all, let's bring this home. You've heard the voice of President William Howard Taft. You've seen how his pen shaped forests, civil service, native lands, and the very bones of our federal system. And you've heard President Joe Biden step in, not to speak for himself, but to connect the dots between what was and what still is. And that's what this show is about. Not just history, not just memory, but understanding how power, real, legal, federal power, moves through time. President Biden helped us break it down. He reminded us that executive orders don't expire with the signature. They ripple, they unfold, sometimes they bloom, sometimes they backfire, but they always linger. And I want you to hear this loud and clear. Many of the executive orders signed by President Donald J. Trump, love him or hate him, will affect your life not today, but 10, maybe 20 years from now. Just like Taft's did. Just like FDR's. Just like Reagan's. That's not politics. That's fact. So what do? We watch. We ask questions. We hold receipts. We stay sharp, not just for the past, but for what's still unfolding. Real-time governance is real-time responsibility. This is your country. This is your story. And I'm just here to help you read the fine print. For democracy, I live for. For democracy, I die for. I'm E. Millions Williams. This is Executive Order Watch. We're just getting started. Stay woke, stay legal, stay watching.